Thank you, everybody. I appreciate everybody's attendance tonight. I know we have a bigger crowd than maybe what we anticipated, so please keep your masks up if at all possible, and we'll try and keep this short and sweet. So, first order of business is the public hearing. We're going to hold a public hearing tonight to hear public comments, oral or written, for the new ordinance allowing recreational and medical marijuana businesses facilities in the community in the industrial park. Is there anybody here tonight that wishes to give public comment? There were none received by email as of 4 o'clock this afternoon. All right, well, hearing none, then we're going to close that public hearing and we're going to move on to our regularly scheduled agenda. So, call the meeting to order. It is 7:03. Would you all please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Roll call, please.
Bartholomew? Edwards?
Here.
Fowler?
Yes.
Hart? Posnanski?
Here.
Seidel?
Yes.
President Malzahn?
Here.
We have one absent.
Yes. Mr. Hart said he'll be about 10 minutes late. In your packet, you have a copy of the minutes from our June 15th meeting. We have a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the June 15th, 2020 meeting.
We have a motion by Edwards. Do we have support?
I'll support.
Support by Seidel. Any discussion? All right, hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. In your packet, you also have the bills. You have the check register report in the amount of $179,831.36. And then you have the vendor bills for the month of $48,785.40. Motion to approve the bills?
Motion. I'll make a motion to approve the bills.
We have a motion by Bartholomew. Do we have support?
Support.
Go ahead, Edwards. Okay, support by Edwards. Any discussion?
I was just curious as to who Jason Jesse Construction is, front page about very top there.
He's the gentleman that did the plexiglass install in the front lobby for us.
Oh, you did a nice job. Okay, thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? Roll call, please.
Bartholomew?
Yes.
Edwards?
Yes.
Seidel?
Yes.
Posnanski?
Yes.
Fowler?
Yes.
President Malzahn?
Yes.
All right, that's
All right,
6 votes.
Motion carries
6 to 0.
6-0. All right, we have approval of the agenda. Motion to approve the agenda as presented.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Okay. Motion by Edwards. Do we have support?
Support?
Support by, was Posnanski? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we have a good agenda. Next up, special presentations. We have our Village to City report. I believe that Chairperson Elizabeth Miller is in attendance, along with quite a few of our committee members. So I, again, appreciate everybody coming, and I truly appreciate all the work that everybody put into this. So.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for this opportunity to present the 2020 Village to City Exploratory Committee report. Before I do that, I took a few notes, and I'm not checking email or Facebook, just letting you know. I wanted to thank each member of this committee. From the start of this, of course, it was right around when the pandemic hit, and we had to do it in our homes via Zoom, and some of us got a little creative, and we would forget how to turn things on, myself included. But I'd like to thank Marvin Cushenberry, Julie Grover, Andrew Hale, and myself. We are all the residents. I would like to thank the board members, Randy Seidel, and also President Christine Malzahn for participating. Kelly Stevens, who represents the Chamber of Commerce, she's here tonight. Tom Stevens from the Romeo Planning Commission, Greg Tarr, who represents the Downtown Development Authority, and then our facilitator, James Vetriano, which I probably pronounced your name wrong, I apologize. He's in the audience, and he's been just fabulous to work with. Thank you to you as a board and for entrusting us with this task. It truly has been an honor. It took more time, I think, than we realized it would, but because we were able to do some things from home, it really, for me personally, it wasn't too much of an inconvenience, and it was interesting looking at the historical data. I also want to thank you, Megan, for coming as a board member to some of those meetings, and it shows just for showing up throughout the process. It shows just how committed you are to being a member of this board, so I appreciate you doing that. And you had great questions, which we took into this report prior to tonight. Some of the residents who are here tonight, I think it's important for us to realize as members of this unique community that there is a legacy that we've been given as residents, as homeowners, as voters in this community, and I think it's important to remember that we're being entrusted with this as stewards for the future generations. One of the wonderful things about being in the village is looking forward and seeing how can we make this a better place. The trees that were planted all around the village, my husband is on the tree board and they're working on certain things, and the big trees you see in the village, no one probably alive now knows how big, how small they were at one time, right? I mean, that was people of the past thought to the future about what that would look like for their kids and their grandkids and so on. I know I'm rambling, but I'm almost done. It's important also to remember that this is an exploratory process. To those who may be here who are for or against it, remember no decisions will be made without a vote of the residents and without your voices being heard. So with that, I'm going to go back to the actual report. As chair of the committee, I've prepared a brief summary of the report to present to this board tonight. While we've attempted to highlight important points from the report, I strongly recommend that you and also any resident who would like to read the full report in its entirety. There are pros and cons to the village of Romeo must consider when deciding whether or not to incorporate as a city. This report primarily identifies several reasons for incorporations, which are the pros, while the reasons to not incorporate are not as numerous. They are very important and include a cost and length of time to incorporate, potential impact on political relationships with the Bruce and Washington townships, loss of tax revenue for the townships. In general, the village Board of Trustees will need to determine if the pros of changing included in this report are enough to move forward with the next steps of the incorporation process at this time. It should also be noted, city incorporation has been considered multiple times over the last 60 years, but it has never been taken to the next steps in the process to actually let the citizens vote on the question that is at hand for you all tonight. A little plug for the archives of the village, for the Romeo District Library. A lot of the documents that we needed for this committee were pulled from those archives from the Observer, so that was a fun part of the process. Under this report, we're still on page 1. Do you want me to go through everything on this, Christine? Okay, all right, and whoever else, okay. Under the first section, Michigan cities and village, it's important to note Romeo's population as of the last census, I believe, was 3,596, ranks it as the 8th most populated village in the state of Michigan. We are the only village in the state of Michigan that is part of 2 townships. And with the recent annexation of a portion of Ray Township and consideration of the annexation of Armada, we could be part of 4 different townships. Now, with this point, as a side note, I think it's important for this committee and members of the community to know the village is not, as I understand it, is not looking to annex other properties in the surrounding communities. There's been a couple properties that have been brought forth to the village councils for reasons of getting sewer and water and whatnot. And I can't speak too much on that because I'm not privy to more of that. But it's important to note this is not a reason to, put up pitchforks and go, no, no, no. The next thing is the village of Romeo's population and square mileage is more consistent with median Michigan cities than Michigan villages. And we do go into a little bit more length about this in the full report. Local representation and services. If incorporated as a city, citizens would communicate with one unified government instead of several different local governments. Ease of locating property documents and resources from one body of government, especially given the historic nature of most properties. For those of you who live on the Bruce Township side, which is myself included, I remember when we moved here, I went to the village hall thinking that was where everything would be, and no, you need to go to Bruce Township, and I didn't understand why. Now, of course, we understand why. And if you live on the Washington side, you would have to go to the Washington Township offices for those. So simplification is a really good reason. The demographics of the Village of Romeo versus Bruce Township and also Washington. The Village of Romeo is significantly demographically different from the townships. As Bruce commits to staying rural and Washington becomes a more populated suburb, the village may become more divided and receive less political attention than it historically has experienced. When we say political, we don't mean in divisiveness, we mean as far as intention, what the elected officials may or may not deem appropriate for their communities that they have been elected to serve. According to SEMCOG, on the top of page 2, Romeo will remain the same population size, while growth in Washington Township is expected to continue to be significant. So that we saw on the growth chart, and you'll see that in the full report, pretty much until like 2040, we're just like here. We see some new homes going up around the village, but there isn't a lot of room for the population, unless we grow up, which I'm pretty sure most of us who own historic homes, we don't want to see a bunch of high-rises in downtown Romeo, right? All right, next section is charter versus general law village. As a city, the Village of Romeo community members would be able to draft and adopt its own unique charter with governing principles that are specific to the needs of the community, providing more local control of government rather than being controlled by the state legislature as it currently sits. This is a unique opportunity to develop our own definition of what the new Village of Romeo may look like. By listening to our residents, we can keep everything that works great in the village and address those areas that need improvement. Financials and taxation. Incorporation assures all Romeo taxpayers with equal services and equal taxation rate, rather than the current separate tax rates and potential differing levels of service depending on which side of 32 Mile the taxpayer lives. And also, as Megan pointed out at our last committee, wondering what about the tax rates of those properties for Ray or Armada. So I believe some of that's been addressed a little bit in this report.
Can I interrupt for just one quick second?
Sure.
Can you go back to the bullet points at land use and community character? Because we skipped over those.
Oh, did I?
Bullet points inadvertently.
Oh, yes. I'm going to finish under the taxation and I'll pop back up to that. Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. I'm so excited about this report. I just got all over myself. The committee reviewed financial projections demonstrating the cost of providing similar services that would be about break even for the taxpayers of the village after incorporation. That was very important. We heard that from a lot of the residents. We reached actually, that's further down in the report, sorry. Let's see, back up to land use. Did I say the first one? I did not. I skipped over the whole thing. Okay. Land use and community character. Development patterns in the townships are diverging and not consistent with the community character of the Village of Romeo. Romeo is unique, which is precisely what draws people to live in the Village of Romeo. We saw it on a map, and we said, that sounds like a cute name, so it's partly why we moved here. Let's see. Okay, the next section, the process to consider incorporation. The process to consider incorporation is a significant undertaking, meaning this is not happening tomorrow. It requires considerable public input and budget considerations. As this can be a lengthy process, residents will be part of the full process and will have an opportunity to voice their opinions and concerns throughout every step of the way. In conclusion, as part of this process, each committee member was tasked with speaking with several residents to get their perception of what village to city meant and to take their concerns back to the committee. Responses came from a wide demographic, and we worked diligently to vet all concerns throughout the process. The committee was very clear on wanting the village to stay quaint and unique, including keeping the name the Village of Romeo. The committee believes the village should continue its current partnerships with Bruce and Washington townships, but with the village as being an equal to the townships. The Village to City Exploratory Committee took action to recommend to the board tonight, to the Board of Trustees, to consider the information in this report and to recommend the board approve moving forward with the incorporation steps noted in phase 2 and 3. So thank you for hearing my report, and I appreciate James did a wonderful job in working on this with me as well. Do you have any questions specifically for me or ones that I can defer to James? And if I don't know, I'll say I don't know.
This is well done. I like it. I like the way you put together everything, the pros and the cons.
Thank you.
And especially your part about the reason why you moved here to the village.
Oh, that's like a 3-hour story, but we don't have time for that
Well, I
tonight.
mean, it's for the fact that the village drew you here because it was the village of Romeo. And I guess at that point, my question to all this committee is, why change it? I mean, it was good enough for you to decide you wanted to live here. Now, all of a sudden, we're looking at wanting to change the way it is. And like I said, I like the report. The fact that we're the only village in the state of Michigan which has a drawing card in itself that borders 2 townships. So if we become a city, that's completely thrown out the window, correct?
Is what thrown out the window? Sorry.
If we become a city and we incorporate our boundaries, then we're no longer the only village within 2 townships. I mean, the townships run right down the middle of Romeo.
Sure.
So that's gone then. So we will no longer have that uniqueness about us, correct?
Well, one could also say, I mean, we don't have a working barn on our property, but I could also be the only person left in the village that has a horse that is able to ride in the village, but that doesn't mean I should stay that way. So there's things that I think moving forward, it's all, I get really hung up on analogies, and one of my friends is here over there, and she's going, oh boy, here she goes. Being the last village in the state that has the unique character of bordering 2 municipalities, I don't know that that's something to just be, you know, I guess I shouldn't answer that. That would be best for you all probably to answer that. But the report's quite extensive, and
I think it's good.
Well, I think we
it's good.
went through that as a committee and looked at the pros and cons of that dividing line. What are the pros to being divided down the middle, and what are the cons? And that was the whole premise of why we formed the committee, is to look at pros and cons for every element that we had in front of us, Zach. So in here, it contains reasons why that is a disadvantage to be split down the middle. Uniqueness is obviously there, but there's also reasons why it's detrimental or it's hurting us to be split.
Well, I think that I love your report. Like the dividing line, 32 Mile Road, or East St. Clair, West St. Clair. As far as the demographics, you got in here as far as the political aspect of it. We will not be ignored because we have a certain amount of bodies on both sides of East St. Clair Street, to where the townships have to pay attention to us.
But one of the
And
components...
plus with our current attempts to do annexation with the properties coming into the village, that property gets rezoned to R1 so we can work with those developers to put new residential housing or apartments in those areas and continue to be a factor within the 2 townships. I mean, you can just look right now up on the streets and see the political signs out there. We are not ignored. The politicians see that there is a plus to advertise here in the village of Romeo because they need both sides of 32.
One of the things you look at in there that I think James did a really good job of analyzing
I think it's very good. I like it.
is that Washington Township continues to grow, exponentially grow.
Correct.
The Washington side of our village is becoming a smaller and smaller and smaller component of the Washington Township piece. Therefore, the concern is that they're just going to minimize and not put the effort into doing anything. We're going to be 3,000 people no matter what happens, and Washington's going to be however many hundreds of thousands or whatever it grows to. So
I think
that's all broken down in here, and I think they did a really good job
I
of
think she did an excellent job, and it just brings questions to wonder. And as far as the growth, the village of Romeo has always been the buffer zone between Washington Township and Bruce Township. For years, this has always been the draw between the 2. And no matter what Washington Township does, Bruce Township is going to remain rural. So we shall continue to be that buffer zone between the 2. And becoming a city, we kind of take that away, and we lose our political influence within those 2 townships.
So, Mr. Cushberry, if I may.
That's Mr. Fowler.
Oh, Fowler, I'm
okay.
sorry. That's right. He was on the committee with I am. Is
Wrong
getting the names all mixed up tonight. Sorry about that. I think yes, Mr. Fowler, I even voted for you. I'm really sorry
Oh,
about
man.
that.
Here, take my
I think it's important to remember that this is it's still, even though we were an exploratory committee, and even though we did vote unanimously to present this to you to move further, it still is, it's a few-year process, and the residents, I think, it's been explored for, I want to say at least 4 times in the last 60 years, and it's never gotten before you all to say, you know what, let's give the residents a vote on this. Let's not just hold it up in a committee and be afraid to say, let's move this forward and see what happens. We could get to the state level and the state could say no, and then it never even goes anywhere if it gets to that point. So I would encourage you to look through the documentation, and I would say also, James, if you feel like there's something you want to say and step in here, feel free. But we can get into the weeds of it. I said this in our last committee. It's important, I think, on any board, in any committee, unless you're talking about a very specific, detailed items, you can get into the weeds and you forget what the big scope is that you were focusing on, and that is, this is an exploration. You may vote for it or against it. If this gets voted in tonight, you have further work to do, right? And Mark, of course, as the village attorney, is going to have further work to do to explore this. It may get to the next step, which I don't remember what page it's on, and you all might say, hold on, put the brakes on, we don't like where this is going. And that is what you've been voted in office to do, right? So I think it would be good to take the information and go from there. Do I have any other questions?
Did a good job.
Thank you.
I just want to say, Zach, what you're holding is a 2-page summary report, and the next thing in your packet is a 30-page breakdown of everything that...
Well, I looked at that.
Okay, all right, just so you know, it's a lot of the questions that you had
hit all the
answered
points.
in there.
Which is great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, and talking about the townships, like Mr. Fowler was, it was mentioned in the minutes that the township should be asked how they view the idea. This will be an important consideration for the committee. Have we done that yet?
I think if we as a committee would have gotten the township's opinions at that point, it would have been premature. Because it is, you all as the Board of Trustees have been elected to be the voice of the residents of the village. So at that point, if you all decide to take it forward, you then take the position of saying, you know what, it's time to find out what the townships think as well. But there's a process to it. The process that you all have been commissioned to do at this point is to take our committee's report and decide if you want to accept it or not.
That is correct, but I feel like that would have been something good to have because you're asking us to go forward with lacking information. Do you need more time? Would you like more time to consider these sort of things? You had talked about in the minutes...
Do you want me to answer that question, Megan?
Sending out a mailer, and that was not done either with the taxes.
Okay, can I answer your first question first?
Go right
Because
ahead.
otherwise I won't be able to keep both those in track in my mind
Yes,
without
ma'am,
it
go
in front of
ahead.
me. So I think you attended maybe the last 3
I attended all of the
meetings.
meetings, ma'am.
Oh, okay. I did not hear that question be presented from any. There was a few other people in the audience, and I didn't hear that question presented during the committee meeting. And none of us as committee members, it didn't come up, and I can speak for myself that I did not feel that it would have been appropriate for us to be speaking with elected officials in the community. No, that's not true. One of them did. No, Mr. Kushner did. He did. Yeah. So I would say to that, I'm going to put it back. We did vote unanimously on this, and I think that it's up to you as elected officials to take it to the next level. What was your next question?
It was about putting the information in with the taxes. We had talked about it, I'm not quite sure which meeting it was, maybe on the 15th. Said you would go back and write something up and come back to the next meeting, and then nothing was presented at the next meeting, and nothing came in our taxes.
Which taxes are you referring to?
She's talking about our annual tax bill. I asked our village treasurer, who at this time declined to put anything in the envelopes to address the residents. We talked about doing a newsletter or putting a survey together, and she decided to just go ahead and mail them. So it was her decision. They are her tax bills, and she had every right to do that, but that's why it wasn't in your tax bills.
Is this something that we would want to do further, though? Like, if it wasn't done at the committee level, is this something we would still want to explore?
Right. If you refer back to, Phase 2 and Phase 3, I can hit some of those bullet points that says exactly what the next steps are, which might help in this process.
Yeah, would you like me to speak to a couple of those?
Go ahead, yeah.
Okay, what page is
It's on
that
page 20 and
James?
21.
Oh, okay. So this could, I mean, it's a page and a half. So under Exhibit 10, there's Phase 1, there's Phase 2, there's Phase 3. We are, right now, right at the top at Phase 2, under 2, giving the committee's recommendations to the Village Board of Trustees and receive feedback, which is what we're hearing a lot of right now, which is fabulous. If you decide to approve it, launch a formal incorporation project and proceed with the remaining steps. Includes the presentations to the village and board and the public. I would like to say at this stage, during the third step under Phase 2 was creating a certified boundary survey, mapping and whatnot. We talked about, one of the things that President Malzahn talked about possibly doing was putting a little bit of FAQ or some information in one of the tax bills was it the tax bill? No, the water. The
tax bill.
Yeah, the tax that just went out recently. And we opted not to because we thought, okay, if we give a little bit of information without a lot of thought to it, sometimes little bits without a well thought out plan creates a panic. And I mean, think about our current situation, right? I mean, is it safe to touch it? Is it not safe to touch it? There's a lot of unanswered questions. So we thought it would be better for you as a board to take that next step, to decide how we're going to communicate more of this with the rest of the village. Did you have a question, Mr. Edwards?
Yeah, I would just like to hear what you
Can you
had to
pull
say,
your-
since
it's hard
you
to
had talked
hear.
to the townships.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah,
if you don't
that's a
mind.
good idea.
I just kind of like to hear what the inputs were.
And I'm going to step way over there, but pull it. You guys are all pretty muffled.
Muffled? I know.
Just to let you
I'm
know when
sorry.
you speak, that's okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm Marvin. I was on the committee, and I met with Dan O'Leary. I talked to Richard Corey on the phone, and Dan, he said we should review it, check it out, and see what it says. Some of our questions, my personal thing on there was, Parks and Rec, the seniors bus and everything. And Dan said he would work with us one way, if we stay a village or we stay a city. He just says, trying to work together and explore. Even if they grow and we don't grow, we could have old Romeo, we could have a new part of that and try to work together. I think as trustee boards, I think you guys should contact each other. Out in Bruce Township, we don't, either elections, we don't know what's gonna happen, but we need to come together and we could stay, the village or city, whatever you vote for. But I don't think there's enough respect for each other's boards right now because, if somebody don't have your opinion, you're a jerk or something like that. We all got different opinions. And even on this committee, I was in the weeds a lot. We got into it sometimes, but my whole thing.
Respectfully.
Yeah, respectfully, and that's, I wrote a little thing as a committee. We gathered the information for residents and other village pursued the change from a city charter, village to a city charter. We didn't try to, convince anyone. Some of our homework went out and we had to go talk to people. I couldn't say pros, I couldn't say cons. I just asked their opinion. And when I was on there, that's all I asked them. I couldn't say what I felt about it or anything else. We were just gathering information and we came back and reported on it. When we voted to send it to you guys, I wasn't involved in the vote. As he would say, put at the bottom, you read the notation. I didn't say, I said, let the trustees decide. Go on from there. So I just, clearing stuff up when you say, what's that? Oh, no, I don't know what you said. All right. So we weren't allowed to do that and come back meeting. We gathered, and I think we did a pretty good job, with the fact finding and, and all that. Some of my personal stuff as a village resident, I had a little personal stuff, and I kind of respectfully would say, no on it, but that's my personal. I can finally say my own opinion now, after all that. Only because of, spending the money and getting somewhere and stopping when our water rates and everything already went up and we're just spending money on something we don't really, know is gonna happen. I look at here thinking we should come together with the two townships, us in the middle, residents on both sides of the township, residents in the middle, and we could have tours. We could have buses going from Washington to Romeo, exploratory stuff, out to the rural area of Bruce Township, and we all work together. That's what I'm seeing as a future on there. We explored about Parks and Rec. You know, we're saying, well, that's why I went down to Dan O'Leary, because everybody said, well, we'll have a voice. I said, you have a voice, but you have no building, you have nothing to do with Parks and Rec. You're giving the kids, as I would call it, Coca-Cola, and you're gonna give them RC Cola, because we can't produce what they got right now. I didn't really want to come together with a Elmont Raiders and Armada Tigers. We're all Bulldogs here. So I wanted to work together like that. So the townships, who's in leadership now, we don't know after August 3rd, right? But right now, they say they will work with us. You know, so you guys go from there. Yes.
I have a question for you. You just said that, you know, you weren't involved in the vote, and you couldn't express your opinion at that time, but you're doing it now?
No, I expressed it, yes. The leader.
It's in the minutes of the meeting.
Look at the bottom of the
Well,
minutes.
I'm just...
Do you see what Cushyberry said?
Yeah, I see what you said here, but
Okay.
I just heard what you just said.
But it wasn't us to decide yes or no. We decided to send it to you or not. You know, we didn't decide, say, well, let's go for it, let's don't go for it. We decided, okay, we got enough information. You guys are the professionals here. You're the trustees. We trust everything into you. You make the decision, not us. You know, you understand that? You know, so that's how it went. In the townships, I hope I answered your question.
Yeah.
You got any more I could, elaborate if you got questions?
Yeah, I don't have any further questions. I just thought that you had the information.
Oh, yeah.
Just kind of.
That's what I thought. I wanted to see what their feelings was about us trying to change.
Right.
You know, Dan said, and here goes there. The two things is our assessments and our elections, right? And we can go one place and vote, stuff like that. I don't know about Bruce Township, but Washington Township actually would save money getting us off their books. So we do have a say on both townships, but you just look at it what it is. And I think everybody should respect everybody, both townships in the middle, right here, Romeo. And if you look outside of here, it's not Washington Township, it's not Bruce Township, it's Romeo, what people care about. And that's what they come to see. And so we try to make this the better place, And it starts with you guys. We all got to get together, and we all got to decide what we want to do, how we can do it the best. I heard some good stuff about sidewalks. We got some bad sidewalks with the bikers crossing going to get hit. Traffic through town. You can't cross the street. Get some X's out there. That's the kind of stuff we got to focus on, as a village or a city. That's what you do. That's all I got.
Thank you.
Perfect. Does anybody else have any other questions for the subcommittee, or?
I didn't see any information as far as, it looks like there's 8 villages that have become cities that were, the last one in the 2015. But Randy and I had attended the meeting in MML to, explore going into this. And we were in a room full of people. I don't know how many villages. There was probably 50 people representing, I would guess, about maybe 20 villages that were all looking at this. And they were speaking on some of the problems and things that they were having. So it seems like in the last couple of years, and what we saw in 19 is there is a lot of interest in doing this. Do you have any idea of, did they give you any numbers of what's happening in the last 6-8 months?
Do we have anything on that? I'm going to defer that to Jane. And then I do have something regarding the different villages to add.
Thank you. We don't have an update from the last 6 to 8 months of other communities that are considering it, but to your point, when you review the report that actually I think that was presented at the meeting you were at from MML, where they described the villages that have made that conversion, a lot of the same issues exist in those municipalities, those villages, as were explored in this report. It's very common. I think the big difference, and Trustee Fowler pointed out very specifically, you're split between 2 or 4 townships depending on the annexation pieces. makes for more complication layered on top of those other issues that the other villages have. As mentioned, your community has considered this many times over its history. And often, at least we reviewed 1994 relatively closely, similar issues came up in 1994 as now. The question is, are they even more pronounced than they were in 1994? And one of the concerns is that Bruce may consider itself one type of municipality, a rural, slow-growth township, and Washington may consider it another type, or has become a regular suburban township with its own zoning to plan for a secondary village area south part of the township. Eventually, their services and their taxation will drift further apart. You've seen that potential at least a couple times with recreational millages on the ballot. As that becomes more pronounced, I think that becomes more and more issue that's very unique to Romeo, not unique to other villages, that you could start to split the services that are available to your residents and certainly taxes that they're paying. So I think looking at those old MML, or all of the MML stuff, it's really reflected in here as well, except that's one more layer on top of that your community has to work with. I also think, and it was brought out in one of the meetings, right, exactly what Trustee Fowler suggested. If you had political influence in both townships, that they could represent the interests of your downtown and the interests of your community, that's actually a really good thing for the village. If, on the other hand, they are not doing that and they are not representing the village in whatever other layers of government, the county or the state or the economic development agencies, then that's detrimental to the village. So I think that's something that really needs to be discussed as this goes forward. And to the point of engaging the townships, that's a must in phase 2, point number 4. But it probably is appropriate, as was suggested by Elizabeth, that the elected officials have that discussion as opposed to the committee members, despite it being reflected that way in the minutes.
Elizabeth, you had another point that you wanted to say?
Yeah. So if you see on the full report on page 5, you'll notice, I think, who asked the question about the cities, the village to cities? I think it was you, Mr. Hart. The cities to villages, if you see some of the other cities named in here, and this is just a small snapshot of the other villages that became cities: Chelsea, Douglas, Grosse Pointe Shores, is it Carroll or Carl? I'm not sure. Caseville, Jonesville, Dexter, and Ovid. Those are all ones that, and it shows the years that they became a city instead of a village. So you think of even the Rochester, right? It's even though it's a city, it's a village, and we can't grow the way that Rochester has, right? We don't have the population for it, we don't have the land space, and so on. Bloomfield Hills is another one. That's the village of Bloomfield Hills. That's also still it's a city, but it's a village. So there's a lot of other cities. If you look at the same data on page 5, with our population, we would be, let's see, where did I see this at?
That's
last one?
77th largest.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Well, regardless, at page 13, then, if you look at the data regarding the zoning for the different communities for Washington Township, that's something that James just mentioned. They've slotted years ago, when they did their new plan for the Township of Washington, to create a downtown village. So what happens somewhere down the future if they decide to change their focus on their village and start pulling resources that might be vital to the taxpayers in Washington Township that reside in the village? Our tax rates currently are pretty parallel with both townships, but that doesn't mean that someday either township could decide that they want to raise taxes in certain portions. So that means if you live on the south side of 32 Mile in Washington Township, if they raise their tax rates, well, your tax rates are now going to be higher than mine because I live on Bruce Township side, or vice versa, and so on. So it's another way to ensure that you have a single voice for your residents as a committee. The thing that I can liken this to, most of you, several of you know, some may not, I sit as the president on the Romeo District Library, and we are without giving you a lesson on libraries, we are a district library, which means we are authorized as a separate taxing entity by the state of Michigan. So we are not beholden to you as a village or the townships to ask Mother, please may I. That's sort of what we're asking you as a committee or as a board to do, to help the village residents have an independent voice, and you as elected officials and whoever that may be at the end of this process, if it goes through, for you to speak for the residents solely, not for us to say, Mother may I to the state, or Mother may I to Bruce Township, or Mother may I to Washington Township, or Armada and Ray, in a tiny little bit of it. Are there any other questions?
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to expand on a point that you just made.
Sure.
And to Mr. Fowler's point of the dividing line of 32 Mile Road. Right now, when the committee studied the financials, this process of becoming a city is basically a financial wash. There is a very small financial gain for the residents in doing this, but not enough that any of us felt comfortable using that as a pro in our point. But currently, right now, residents north of 32 Mile Road pay a different tax rate than the residents south of 32 Mile Road in Washington Township for the very same services. The services that the townships provide for us are elections and assessing. And again, the south side pays less than the north side. I don't consider that an equitable tax rate for our village residents. There's also an administration fee that Bruce Township pays to receive that tax bill. Bruce Township assesses an administration fee that we all pay in Bruce Township that Washington Township residents do not, just for the pleasure of getting your tax bill. So there are some equity concerns when we looked at the financials of why this would ultimately be a benefit. Again, small benefit, but a point that I need to make to add on to the Parks and Rec millage that failed by about 80%. When you look at the township who could come in and assess a millage rate to ask our 1,700 residents to voice their opinion against a $25,000 or $26,000 population that makes up the Washington Township as a whole. Equitably, you do not have as fair of a voice in their proposal than you do if it's just the village boundaries, if it's just a city aside assessed millage. So I just wanted to make that point of what the disparaging the con is of being split by that boundary.
And I guess the pros to what you just explained, about the Parks and Rec, you use that to your advantage. When that vote came up for Parks and Recreation, you mobilized the entire south side plus other residents of Washington Township to help defeat that Parks and Recreation proposal. So the advantage of having village voting residents in both sides is an advantage to both townships and the village of Romeo.
Again,
So if I could speak to a couple.
Right, yeah.
Well, I mean, you did mobilize, you advertised, you did good. You did great. But you use both sides. You use that side.
To be put in that position is unfortunate.
So I guess what I'm saying is,
Right, yeah.
if we become a city, it wouldn't have happened.
So I'd like to go off my script just a smidge. I know I've done it several times already, but some of the things that we as committee members felt was really important. Number one, I think, was probably that we stay the Village of Romeo, that name does not change, period. That was extremely important. Another thing that was really important was to get and I don't think I've done a good job at this, and what I'm about to say. The other things that were really important was to express how much we want to stay in the tri-community agreements that we currently have. You know, the library, for one, is separate, right? Because it's governed by the state, so we have it's a separate entity. However, Parks and Rec, currently, most residents don't understand the village does not have a sitting voice on the Parks and Rec Commission. There is only one person from Bruce and one person from Romeo, with no thought or insight from an elected official who's been appointed to that committee to voice what the village residents want. That, to me, was a huge reason, to be honest with you, why I chose to be on this committee when I was asked. Because not having a voice and what we want for Parks and Rec as village residents, I think is a huge disservice to the residents of the village. The senior transportation, again, was a huge important thing. This is not a push or a pull to pull out of any of these services. If anything, it's to continue to lock arms and to stay positioned where we're at moving forward, but to give us more of a solid footing as village residents and not having to say, "Mother, may I?" There was a question up in the front. Yes.
Just from what I understand is that villages are not subject to detachment. So to me, that means that the townships could possibly take us over. If we become a city, or they can take us over if we do become a city.
That is my understanding, but that would be a better question for James.
But like, while you're still standing there, when you brought up Parks and Rec, if that's like the only issue that brings us to this, that's a lot of money to spend over an issue that probably could get worked out.
And that's up to the council to answer that. That's a good question.
I mean, hiring an assessor, we would have to hire an assessment with an industrial.
We already pay for that, though. As village residents, we already pay for that. Half of it on the Bruce Township side and half of it on Washington Township.
The village into our taxes, so yeah, I understand. But, you know, like, so then if we go separate, then we would have to hire our own with, an industrial license, and we'll have to get a full-time treasurer, a full-time clerk for the elections, because, Washington handles our elections, so it just, there's a lot of other things that have to be singly bid out now all of a sudden.
Which is what they will vet through, right?
A piece of the
Yeah.
cost of what this is over Parks and Rec.
A lot of that is addressed in the body of this, and I just want to make sure that everybody understands. I mean, this just wasn't the 8 of us that put this together, right? James and Steve put a bunch of time with their background, a lot of research went into this, so I don't view it as a biased document one way or another. I view it as pretty deep in facts around it. Obviously, the residents we interviewed, the comments that we got, our thoughts were kind of put into it, but I think James did an excellent job making sure that it wasn't just opinions, that there's facts in here, and it's more than Parks and Rec, it's more than the dividing line. There's a lot of elements in here, and they all add up either one way or the other, right? So it was emotional, but it was actually some.
We need to have it. This is an important issue.
Yeah.
This is changing local government, and it's more people need to know about it rather than just one article in the paper. Like, media should have covered this.
To address your point specifically, when we looked at the financials, there is a savings. The money that the residents currently pay both to Bruce Township and Washington Township is about $100,000 and some thousand. From that $100,000 and some savings is where we anticipated the cost of paying for the assessing and the elections. So this process, again, wouldn't cost additional for those. The realized savings, if we were comparing apples to apples, so what do we pay for right now as village residents, the cost is the same exact services, the same exact standing. The cost associated with this process is in paying for legal services, in paying for a boundary survey, in paying for a ballot initiative. Those have real costs associated with this process in asking the residents to come to the polls and vote for it. So it's not a cost associated with becoming a city per se, but it's just the cost in the process of prepping everything.
Right.
Financially, again, it is a wash to the residents, but it gives you one whole voice, one body of government that you report to, and that then reports back to you.
I'll try and answer your first question, and then I may spill over into your second question. With regard to boundaries, and whether you're a village boundary or state boundaries in terms of another municipality annexing a piece of you or taking a piece of you, there's no advantage or disadvantage. A village is a recognized form of government by the state of Michigan. Your boundaries are integral to yourself, and any municipality that wishes to annex a piece would be the same process as if you were a city. That may not have always historically been the case in Michigan, but over time those boundaries have become pretty sacrosanct for both municipalities. With regard to cost, just to add numbers to what President Malzahn provided, about $44,000 goes to Washington Township for election and assessing service, and about $72,000 goes to Bruce Township. Bruce Township uses a contracting assessing company, and the committee, I appreciate Andrew's help, a committee member, we looked at that contracting cost, and so when President Malzahn says that it's a wash to provide the same level of services, whether you're a village or a city for assessing an election, we did some research on those costs. And so going forward, that's what we're saying is a wash or a slight savings to become a city. There is a capital investment, I'll call it that. There is the upfront money that President Malzahn mentioned to go through this process, a one-time cost, probably over 3 to 5 years that this may take, or 2 to 4 years, depending on speed and election timing and applications to the state. But once incorporated, that $110,000 would be what would be needed for running those two services.
Was there an estimate on that upfront cost that you're speaking of?
Yeah, in the report, we had a lot of caveats on it depends on if there's challenges, it depends on responsiveness from the state, but we estimated about $30,000 over those 2 to 4 years, and that could be budgeted in different budget years. So that was our best estimate. Again, this is a very unique process for each community. We did look at 2 other communities that went through the process to try and gauge that cost, but it is very dependent on responsiveness, how much interaction the board would like to have with its residents, as well as challenges that could be filed by the townships and responses that would have to be made.
There was another question at the back of the room. I saw somebody's hand go up earlier. Maybe it got answered.
Thanks, James.
All right. Well, that was a lot of information, so I thank you all for your patience. I think it's very, very informative. We will have copies of this full report. Is there a link to it on our website yet?
No, I can make one
Okay,
tomorrow.
so Catherine will work with IT to get that full report up.
I just wanted two comments, or 2 things, for what Mr. Cushenberry spoke on. Whether we move forward to city or state village, either way, Bruce, Romeo, and Washington, we're always going to be Romeo Bulldogs. We're going to be one big happy family. And as far as Dan O'Leary goes, Dan O'Leary's up for re-election, and any question you propose to him at this time, I'm sure he's going to make sure that he chooses all the right words, just so you know.
And all of us would.
With that comment, I got to say, you know, we can have a voice with Parks and Rec and stuff like that, what Dan would say or not say, or whoever forbid or whoever's in there. We can have a voice with no action. We might have to tell our kids they got to drive 10 miles that way because they can lock us out of Parks and Rec. It's their choice. Right now, all they say is pay a non-resident. But we might say, okay, we're a city, we got our own voice. Now, if you got your own voice, you got to produce a product. Now, we're talking about, you know, they talked about talking to Armada, they talked about talking to Elmont. As a school basketball coach, we do our fundraising through Parks and Rec in the summer. Now, our jerseys and different things, what we get from the residents here, we're not going to ever get split that up if we go that way for our kids. And then the kids on one side of 32 and that side of that, if we're a city, watching kids and Romeo kids not playing together.
Well, I don't think we want to go north. I think we want to keep everything where it's
that's
at.
what we propose as
It's been talked about.
the committee. That's the thing, options we were looking into.
Just to answer your point, you know, I did go to Washington Township before the last millage from last fall, and I asked them for a consideration to place an appointed person from the Village of Romeo. I sent the same request to Bruce Township for Romeo to have a person appointed to that committee. It was approved by Bruce Township, and it was denied by Washington Township. So we did ask for that voice. It was that body that said, no, thank you. And so we also, again, the committee focused on making sure that we would put every effort forward, and I believe this board would put every effort forward in maintaining that current relationship, but it is out of our control if another municipality wishes to vacate that relationship. And that's what we have to anticipate the possibility of. It may or may not come to fruition. I hope that it doesn't. I hope that we can continue to serve the residents as we are, but to be moved to inaction based on what might or might not happen, I don't think is a very good way for us to preserve our legacy, to preserve the village and what we need here.
I'm not following a voice. I mean, you want something, what would that voice, one, say, okay, somebody's on the committee, what, I mean, they listen to
voting
what we
member.
want. When we do summer programs in
Right.
Parks and Rec, as a coach, I get to go to Parks and Rec and tell them what we want to do in the summer. Is that a voice from the village or
No.
from the school?
Neither, because both the township representatives voted to either approve or disapprove your request.
Yeah.
They chose.
But I'm saying, what do
Somebody
you
from
want to do
Romeo
as a
didn't
village
have a vote in that
what
process.
they're not doing for us? I'm not following, I'm just trying to follow. If we got a voice on it, we got somebody on that committee, right?
No, we do
So
not.
if we did,
If we did,
what would be the changes? The changes, I mean.
Hopefully
I think
there would be no
everybody in
change.
Romeo in the village and everybody in Washington and everybody in Bruce kind of want the same thing. I don't know what's on there and they say, well, they're Romeo residents, they can't get it. I mean, Parks and Rec is producing pretty nice stuff.
Absolutely.
For the seniors.
They do a fabulous
So,
job.
that's what I'm saying, but
Yep.
We're focusing on a voice, that's more like a power struggle. We want somebody on this committee. You know, we want to produce something nice.
Fairness.
I think
You
it's
know,
just,
we want something nice for the residents. It don't matter if we don't have somebody on that committee.
Hey, Marvin, I
Well,
think
just
you're
remember-
balancing things out, right? If you got one from Romeo, one from Washington,
Yeah,
one
but
from
I mean,
Bruce,
why?
it's balanced.
That's just something where, why do we need to balance it?
You gotta have a majority, right? Okay, like the Washington guy says no, and the Romeo guy says yes, or the
I'm
Bruce guy.
I mean, we're assuming, I don't follow.
May I interject a comment?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
What, yeah, we're getting in the weeds, Marvin.
Right.
I know. I think we would have fun working together. We should figure something out. I think one of the things we found out that was interesting as a committee, something was brought up that we thought that there was a survey that was done in the 90s and made the recommendation that they contact the library to see if they could look through the archives. And James didn't even know this. We as a committee probably spent 2 meetings exploring almost verbatim when those articles came up from 1994. It was like we were reading the minutes from our own meetings. And he and I talked about the fact that we were actually happy we didn't know about it ahead of time, because we would have missed a very important part of the process of presenting this to you. If we had just read old articles from 26 years ago, we wouldn't have had the knowledge that we each pulled from doing our own exploration. From one of the articles that were in there of the Bruce Township supervisor at the time, he said, if it's not broke, why fix it? Well, I'll tell you why, because like a refrigerator, if you know something could potentially go bad, it's due diligence, right? It's due diligence to look to the future, what could be worked on. So one of the other trustees at the time, who's now retired and moved out of the area, but he said, I see this being a necessity in less than 20 years. And here we are 26 years later, still talking about it. So is this a conversation that we just keep on having, or is it time for you all to make a decision? So I appreciate the time, and I will stop talking for here. But thank you for the honor of helping serve the village. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Okay, let's move on to the next item on our agenda, which is correspondence. Just briefly, I have one correspondence. You have a copy of it in your packet. It's a letter from Samaritan House. It reads, on behalf of Samaritan House Board of Directors, I want to thank you for the CDBG funds the Village of Romeo has allocated to our nonprofit. Samaritan House is a 501c3 organization that has been relying on the generous support of the community to pursue its mission work since 1995. Leaders like you help us to meet the needs of our families, your constituents who are facing hardships in the Village of Romeo and elsewhere locally. Every gift made to the Samaritan House directly aids residents of the northwestern Macomb County who are at risk of hunger or eviction. Your choice to support Samaritan House will truly make a difference. So I just wanted to mention that. Thank you. They do great work over there, and if no one has had a chance to tour their facility, they are back open. I believe face masks are required, and always they appreciate any donations that you can send their way. Moving on to officer reports. My president report for July 20th. Village offices remain open for public walk-ins Monday through Thursday, 8:30 to 4:30 p.m. All who enter are required to wear a mask. As of today, Romeo has 18 reported COVID cases, with deaths remaining at 4. No change there since a month ago, so that's good news. There are 18 cases in Bruce Township with 5 deaths, 111 cases with 6 deaths in Washington Township. Planning Commission Chairman Jim Stegner, due to health concerns, has requested that their meetings continue to be held on Zoom. I assisted him the last 2 meetings with the IT and the organization of the attendees. It worked out quite well. Their next scheduled meeting of August 6th will also be on Zoom only. It is his decision whether or not he wants to hold an in-person meeting or a video meeting, and so by his choice, those will continue to be online. Community Shred Day was a huge success. I wanted to thank Richard Corey and Clerk Trapp for volunteering their time with me to help the residents unload and keep the line of cars moving. We had over 40 vehicles drive through, generated over 3,000 pounds of paper in the truck when it left. If you did miss that event, there's a next one scheduled September 26th. That one will be held at the Bruce Township Hall this time. All Romeo and Bruce residents are welcome to bring their papers to be shred on site. You can watch the little camera. You can see it go in, you can see it shred and dump out in the truck, so you know that you're good to go once you pull away.
You're welcome to stay and watch.
Yes. Organizers from the Romeo Backs the Blue Appreciation Group held a rally on July 11th in support of our first responders. The day's events included a march of supporters from Croswell Street up to the Village Park, followed by an afternoon of speeches and live music from the band Family Tradition. They entertained a nice-sized crowd there. I was proud to march with my mask on alongside our community members. I really wanted to thank Mark Davis and Amy McDonald for their efforts in organizing and promoting this event in such a short time frame. They graciously presented a check for $2,000 to our police chief last week. It will help offset the renovation cost of their locker room area, and those funds were from their GoFundMe page. So thank you for everybody who contributed, came out for that event. Much appreciated. At the last DDA meeting, we held some discussions regarding harvest days. It was voted to cancel the event for 2020 due to health and safety concerns for any attendees. Our decision followed, sadly, the announcement by the Lions to cancel this year's Peach Festival as well. That is my report for this month. Clerk Trapp, do you have a report?
Yes, I do. The Cemetery Board will be meeting this coming Wednesday, July 22nd at 3 p.m. at the Village Hall. The notice for the meeting has been posted in the window, and it is currently on our website. We do not have an agenda at this time. I would also like to announce in speaking with the cemetery that as of last week, we are sold out. There are no more vacant spots to be purchased within the Village Cemetery. Our last section, the 12th, has no more spots for sale. That was the last section being sold. Last week, I had my monthly Macomb County Clerks Association meeting via Zoom. During that meeting, I was voted in for a second term as trustee to the association. Next month's meeting will be held with a representative from the Secretary of State to further discuss the upcoming general November election. Next part of my report, I wrote the section with much discussion with my village staff, or the village staff that reports daily in our office, and they read the report and they agree with everything I had to say because a lot of these are their thoughts. So it was brought to my attention that a leader in the community had made a posting on social media a few weeks back about our new summer hours, asking if we, in quotes, are looking at less service for the same price. I don't know who you mean by we, because it is the village staff who work tirelessly for our residents. I had a discussion with my staff in regards to this posting, and not only were they hurt, they were angry and very offended that this came from a leader in the community. During the entire COVID quarantine, I had staff reporting every day. The lobby wasn't open for obvious reasons, but staff was reporting every day to answer phones and keep appointments with residents who needed to come in. In the beginning, it was scary and emotional since these were unprecedented times. Even with their own shortened schedules, someone was here every day to answer the phones. Not once did my staff hear a thank you from any other leader in the community. Therefore, that made this post sting even more. I will let you know that my staff is available more than residents are aware. Myself being the cemetery sexton, I have my office calls forwarded to my cell phone after business hours. All the other staff members have the capability of the phones and getting emails at home. I am able to check and respond to emails from home also, as do Cindy constantly gets texts from vendors and residents on her days off. After the discussion with my staff, they had asked me to invite the trustees to come into the office and ask, how is our day? Ask us, what are we working on? The staff would love to show you how your voting on certain agenda items affects how they can conduct business for the residents. I've had this discussion countless times with my staff, and they are completely frustrated at this. So please tell me what service will be offered less to the residents. Again, those are words of the village staff and mine. They have read this before I read it to all of you. That is all.
Thank you. Treasurer Maddox?
I want to get the update as I mailed out the tax bills and processing all the tax bills accordingly, so everything seems to be going smoothly as we recede into the cash receipt system. And that's my update. I just want to address the comment, Christine, and really reach out to Marvin. I think you spoke some words that we all really need to hear. We just need to be able to all come together and work, and I was open to putting the newsletter in. I already said everything that I needed to say on my tax bill. Any other communication doesn't pertain to what went in the taxes. I see and speak to my residents on a daily basis via phone, interaction out in the community. I answer my phone. I'm in there every day. And I just want to say we really just need to stop with our nonsense, because I'm sure you as residents and employees are about fed up. So that's the end of my report.
Okay. Do we have any trustee reports? Trustee Bartholomew?
Yeah, just real quick, completely changing the subject here to the sidewalks in Romeo. Excuse me. Things were put off because of COVID-19, but we're able to move forward now at this time. One of the things that I want the residents to know is that when we walked through the community and designated how many squares for each home needed to be fixed, we did that. But what's happened is the contractor is telling us that, look, we can fix these two that are trip hazards, but this one here is cracked, and when we go to fix these two, this one's just going to fall apart. So for a lot of the residents, not a lot, but some of the residents, there may be an additional square that'll have to be repaired in order to do the two bad ones, so to speak. So that's all I have on that. And I have been talking to the people who've already paid and a few others that really want to get going on this, and they have no problem having a whole bunch of them fixed if that's what it takes. So hopefully we'll see some action soon, and we'll be able to move forward with fixing our sidewalks.
Great. I appreciate you working on that. Trustee Pozanski?
I do have a few things, thank you. I also attended the police rally. It was a great time. It was absolutely family-friendly. I was able to take two of my children. Good turnout, good music, good people all around. We love our police here in Romeo. Another thing is I wanted to congratulate with the DDA Kelly Stevens as the new chair on our committee. She's able to wear a lot of hats around here, and I thank her for taking on one more for our committee. And I wanted to say that I am attending online, learning from MSU Extension. It's a 4-course class. It is about the power of participation, the importance of actively engaging the public. When I saw this come across my email, I thought this was a great thing, considering this possibly turning into a city, learning how to actively engage the public at every step. And then, just in case you were a little confused with Clerk Trapp's comment, I wanted to clarify some things. The Facebook post was mine. I'm not ashamed of what I post on social media. If you want to actually go look at it, my page is I'm with Meg, Meg spelled M-E-A-G. That's my political page. And what I wrote was, yay, village offices are back open, but only 4 days a week now. Will this reflect in savings for the taxpayers? Or are we looking at less service for the same price? Meaning, one less day that the people are in the office working, will we get a cost savings? That was my post. You can go look at it. People had good ideas. They said, well, how about maybe we open up, do a late night like on a Wednesday? Go ahead, close one day and then open late so that we can come in so it's not closed. People had good comments. I went on because President Malzahn went on Facebook and had a comment about how hurtful it was to the office staff. And I said, I apologize if I hurt the office staff. My post was not directed towards the office staff. It was directed towards, would we see a cost savings? Essentially, that's going from 4 weeks in a month to 3 weeks in a month. Would we see 1 week cost savings? That was my question. Well done.
Anything else? Okay. Trustee Edwards,
No
any report?
comment here.
Trustee Saito, any
I
report?
was going to go back to the village to city thing, but I think I'll pass.
Okay. It's on the agenda later.
Oh.
Trustee Hart?
Just hearing the social media things, that can really cause some problems, and I saw that too, but I would think that would be a question residents might ask a trustee rather than a trustee throwing a question out there. Sometimes that causes a little more of problems than it solves.
Excuse me.
On that note there, according to what Bob said and what Megan said, good job of apologizing, but we are the megaphones of the residents talk to us, and they expect us to voice their opinions. And that's what I picked up from this conversation, what she just said. They're in my ear all the time. They're asking me, when's that grass going to get cut on the corner of Dickinson and, Clinton and 32, East St. Clair Street? When is that going to be? But having said that, I figured you're going to take care of it. But they're in my ear like, when are you going to do your job? When are you going to say something? And I figure you're going to do it. But
And if I could
Megan, good job on expressing what voting residents are putting in your ear.
Thank you. And if I could go farther, you commented that why have I not come in and said thank you or come in to see what everybody does?
That
I
wasn't
have sent
directed to anybody in
flowers into the
particular.
office before, and if we all recall, there was a time that I received a letter where I was told I'm not allowed in the office and not wanted, and to not waste the people's time with my questions. So
I
to
did not
tell
mention
me
any
that I
names
did
in my
not come in
report.
to see what the people had to do, I'm obeying your request.
All right. Planning Commission, ex officio.
We're going to cover everything that basically happened, and so
Yes.
we're good.
Okay, perfect. There are no committee reports at this time, so public comments on agenda items. Is there anybody in the public audience that wanted to address any of the agenda items? All right, hearing none, let's move on to the annexation request by Mr. Zahowski.
We have a
Yes?
couple bodies stood up when you said public.
No, they're here for the annexation request. Supervisor Patter, did you want to talk under public?
I was actually going to ask permission to speak on the annexation.
I assumed that you were. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have made that assumption, but yes. Okay, yes, that'll be just fine. Mr. Zahowski and his legal representation are here. You have in your packet a copy of their request, and you also have a copy attached to the back of Supervisor Paterak's letter from Armada Township that I believe he's going to address. So.
Thank you, President Alzan and members of the board. Just for the record, my name's Larry Scott. I'm an attorney. I'm with O'Reilly Rancilio. I'm here again representing Mr. Zukowski with a little bit of a different request this time. This request is directed to the village here and requesting that they petition the county this time to annex a portion of Armada. Mr. Zukowski owns property under various different names. Chet's numbers 1, 2, 4, 5, and then there's approximately 65 acres of vacant property. As you know, we received correspondence from the attorney for Armada Township who indicated that Armada Township is not even negotiating anymore with regard to providing any sewer or water services through the 425 agreement that they had with Romeo. So we're at an impasse in that respect, and we're here asking that you consider to annex that portion of the Armada property into Romeo so that we too can be provided with the water and sewer services that we need. The 1, 2, 4, and 5 are currently developed. They have buildings on them. The vacant property to the north and to the east is like 65 acres. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but I think it's pretty straightforward.
Does anybody have any questions on their request?
I have one. You indicated that Armada Township, about a 425 agreement?
I'm sorry, are you talking to Mr. Scott or are you talking to me? Because I'm not sure.
No, I'm Mr. Scott here. He just mentioned about a 425 agreement with the village of Romeo.
That was the proposed sewer agreement that's no longer on the table.
Right.
We received correspondence from Armada Township Direct that they were no longer going to pursue that 425.
Okay.
So
I have a letter here from Mr. Siebert that said on July 17th, 2017, Armada Township and the Village of Romeo executed an intergovernmental agreement for sewer disposal services. The agreement and subsequent amendments envisioned Armada Township connecting to the village's sewer disposal system upon completion of a special assessment district in Armada Township. And then it goes on to say on March 11th, 2020, the Armada Township Board of Trustees voted to cease all further negotiations with the village relating to the agreement. Purpose of this correspondence is to notify the village of the board's decision on March 11th. So, I mean,
So that's what you're talking about as far as that, okay.
Yes, the one that we worked on for about 9 years.
exactly.
Done. We really tried, didn't we, John? We really tried. Yes. Okay.
Can I ask one more question? Mr. Clerk, regarding the termination of the 3/11/2020 letter, and this attorney here currently standing, are we able to talk with Mr. Zukowski and listen to his proposals as far as?
Absolutely. The agreements that were in place with Armada Township were primarily forward-looking, if you will. The village was going to, was willing to, and had agreed to provide sewer and water at a particular price if Armada did certain things. And off the top of my head, those certain things are, one was they would create a special assessment district to pay for the installation of the sewer lines and water lines on the east side of Powell Road, which would be in Armada Township. And for whatever reason, the township struggled with that. They, I believe, hired an engineer to develop the plans. They may have even hired legal counsel to set up the special assessment district or proceed in that direction, but it never came to fruition. And you as a board, I think, extended that agreement at least twice, and it may have been 3 times. And there was a termination date. At one of your meetings, there was a request to extend it further. And one of your meetings, you decided no, upon its expiration, that's it, no more, because at the time, I think the township had abandoned its idea of a special assessment district, and I think there were cost issues involved. All of that is the responsibility of the township. And so that agreement, while it was enforceable and it was legitimate, it never produced an end result. The sewer and water lines were not installed, the special assessment district was not created, and so the village did not have an obligation to provide sewer and water services, and the village did not have any further obligation to extend the agreement. It didn't have any obligation at all to extend the agreement. And so it terminated either by its own force or lapsed by the date provided in the most recent extension. So as far as any relationship between the village and Armada related to the services, there is none. There's no obligation on the part of the village to provide services, and there's no obligation on the part of Armada to accept and pay for the services. So you're essentially starting over. You have a clean slate.
Thank you.
So did anybody have any questions for this gentleman regarding the annexation request? Okay. Then if you don't mind, I'm going to defer to Mr. Paderak, who can address the letter. At last month's meeting, I mentioned that we had Chet's request, and we also had correspondence from Mr. Paderak at that time, and the board decided to pursue annexation over further discussions with Armada, but we received further correspondence from Mr. Paderak, and I will defer to you for your comments.
Thank you. Yeah, John Patrick, Armada Township Supervisor. President Malzahn, I'd like to thank you for continuing to keep the lines of communication open. Chester, you as well. It's been fun working with you, and I continue to think that we'll be able to in the future. My basic request, and I think we might have missed it a little bit, I don't think we abandoned a 425 agreement with the Village of Romeo. We abandoned a special assessment district and the request for sewer services, being that we have our own water pipe. Now that that's off the table, everything is, like you say, it's a clean slate. My goal, if you will, is to try to find a way to help our property owner, Chet Sikowski, develop property, allow Romeo Village to expand its tax base, and to try to protect what Armada Township can of its emergency services. My request, I think, in the letter was a conversation starter, to say the least. I'd like to think that at some point there could still be a potential for Chester to develop this property and for our communities both to benefit through mutual development in that area. I've always believed strongly that any development that happens in our Romeo or our Powell Road 32, 33 mile road corridor is directly going to have an impact on the businesses and the livelihoods and the people in Romeo Village itself. Hardly anybody, if anybody, drives into Armada Village or to have lunch, per se. So my request, or my thought first, is there a way, and no matter what we do, please keep in mind, it needs to be expedited. Chet Sikowski's waited way too long to try to get services on his property, so whatever this board decides to do, you're the ultimate authority on what you need to do. We have a situation too, is to where when the annexation does take place, if it does, that I'll do what I can to protect whatever tax base I can for say, and it's all with respect for Romeo Village, the work you've done with us in the past in Chester and our township. It'll all be in good faith, and it'll all be it'll all be above board. No hard feelings whatsoever. I totally respect everything we've been through, and it's been a long, long haul. But I think that if Romeo was to annex the properties into Romeo Village, and it remains actually in Armada Township because they still pay an operating mill, we would lose our ALS and fire millages. And at that point, we have a situation too on the east side of us where Richmond Township does not contract fire services with us anymore and provide their own fire service for mutual aids into their community. So it's gotten a little messy on the east side as to what services we can or can't provide and how the building goes about doing that. So my request always has been to try to save our fire and ALS mills so we can continue the services that we share with the fire services in Washington Township, Bruce, and Armada to provide that same service that we do in Bruce Township. So I'm here with an olive branch. You know, I apologize for any for the last 18 months or so of going sideways. I think it's taken us too long to get to a point to where we can sit down and try to come up with something that'll work for all of us. So that's my request, is to try to maintain my ALS and fire mills in that property area and find a way to allow Chet to develop his land.
Certainly no apology is needed. Sometimes the pace of government is maddening, and we all know we all know that progress can be slow at times. You know, we're just putting a good foot forward, and we appreciate, you know, that you are really our next door neighbor on Powell Road. I'm looking forward to getting that paving project underway. Maybe if the Act 51 money public road funding holds holds, and jointly with you. So whatever this board decides, if they think it's in its best interest is to pursue the annexation, it would be a vote of this board. If they are directing me to form a subcommittee to enter into negotiation for another version of a 425, that's certainly, what
Well, I know that
I'm agreeable
my
to.
paperwork that I submitted said, and I'm thinking to myself, what less burden could I put on Romeo Village for the privilege of having you provide services to Chester? I mentioned, potentially keeping the permitting, the planning, if you will, inspections for the development of the properties there, not thinking that, of course, it probably would take inspection fees away from your inspectors and whatnot. So that was something I thought about just to try to lessen the burden on Romeo Village as to what they would have to do to develop that property. So if the village would like to, take the permitting process over, we would only ask that you would respect our ordinances and, if you will, that everything's developed the same way as our master plan would like to see it through. But other than that, it's really, I'm here for my fire mills, I'm here for my LS mills. I'm here for the emergency services, and I'm here to help Chester develop this property, and I'm here to be a good neighbor to Romeo. And I want to tell you another thing, too. I'm a Tiger, Armada Tiger through and through. It was brutally tough. I actually picked my motorcycle because of the colors orange and black. But I want you to know that I'm a graduate of Romeo High School, just so you know, we can be converted. So I had to get that off my chest.
Transparency at its finest. All right. I appreciate your comments. Mr. Scott, I do have a few other questions, if you wouldn't mind. I met with Mr. Zahowski today in my office, and we briefly talked about some other scenarios, some other options, and that would be for Romeo to proceed with the annexation of the vacant property, but do a 425 agreement with the existing buildings on several of those parcels that are identified in the letter that you see in front of you. So I'm not sure if you guys had further discussions, if you were willing to revise your annexation request, or...
Right now, I think we want to stay with the whole thing. The buildings 1, 2, 4, 5, and the vacant property.
Okay.
As stated in the letter. As stated in the request.
That was my understanding from meeting with Mr. Zagowski earlier today.
Okay, which is fine, because doing that would have made getting from the newly annexed Ray Township property, then skipping the 425 property where the buildings are, then going next door to the vacant property, created a connecting issue. How would the pipe go from the former Ray Township properties to the new annexed properties while going through a Armada property? Created some questions in my head of logistic-wise, how would that work? Plus, our boundary map would look like a jigsaw puzzle, literally. But we did talk about that as an option. So, does anybody have any other questions for Mr. Scott or Mr. Paderak, or some directions?
So the discussion that we've all been only 2 years into this, not 9 years or whatever. What we've been discussing all along is what you just mentioned, and Chester agreed to, right? What we agreed to move forward with was the full annexation, is what the conversations were in the past couple of months, right?
Correct.
Okay.
He came forward with initial letter of intent that we saw at last month's meeting. It didn't cite these parcel ID numbers, so now they gave it in a formal request report.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Sorry.
My concern that I expressed to Chester today, again, when I met with him, is that, annexing property that's vacant, that comes in as R1, really doesn't add much to our tax base, right? The meat and potatoes is when that property is developed. I don't think that area is industrial, would probably rezoned as industrial, would really vet out a new subdivision per se, given its location right along Powell Road there, although it could, because I'm not the developer, but more than likely it would remain industrial and be developed for business use, and that's the biggest supplier to our tax base and offers the biggest growth for us. So financially, I think that's the better win, but again, not opposed to meeting with Mr. Paderak and looking at a 425 and what sort of rate structure would we put together, because that's basically what we were proposing in the work that we did in the 425 was an annual fee, a payment of, it escalated depending on how many years there were and how many gallons, but there was basically a base fee Still, the developers, the property owners would pay for the infrastructure. I don't think that would change. But the cost factor just became astronomical based on how many users they were going to be able to bring on to our MADA system. So I'm still not sure financially the best interest of the village lies in bringing users onto our water and sewer system, but also maintaining as big as tax base as we can maintain.
Just pertaining to exactly what you're saying, if we do the full annexation, which they're requesting, then it goes through a process of our planning commission, which everything's zoned residential first, which you're absolutely correct. I think we would work with the property owners to come in and get it up to their current zoning. And then we could look at the vacant lands for residential development. I mean, we're bulging at the seams here within the village of Romeo. Right now, we don't have any large areas of space to do affordable housing, residential housing, single-family housing, apartment housing. And I think this presents an excellent opportunity to the village of Romeo as far as what we can do and where we can put these things. Plus, I think that Mr. Edwards, our contract is coming up maybe next year, something with Bruce Township as far as fire ALS.
No, that's about another 4 years down the road.
4 years, we're down the road. But we may, Mr. Patrick just, he indicated something about wanting to preserve that fire ALS millage. Well, I think a gifted horse is starting to look us in the mouth as far as us getting a service here back in Romeo where we can maintain our own fire and ALS service, because we do own that property where our DPW yard is in Armada Township. And I think with your negotiation, we can probably work something out to do a partnership with these guys. And because Bruce Township's thing is going to continue to keep going up on us.
I'm sorry, a partnership for
Fire
for
ALS?
fire and ALS service from the village?
Yes.
Oh.
Partner with Armada Township. They have what we want.
I would question the response times. That would be my biggest thing.
I just said put a facility on
just
Powell
get
Road
brighter
at our
in here, right?
DPW
Okay.
yard. That's why, not coming from Armada, we have property in Armada Township.
Right.
So we could put a facility there at our DPW yard.
We could or they could?
We could, well, in combination with them. And then we would have our own again, that in combination with these guys, but he's looking to preserve what he has, and we've been looking to get back on our own feet. And as we know, Bruce Township is constantly going up on us.
I don't know that we've really been looking to get back on our own feet, though.
Well,
I mean, I think we've been pretty, other than cost, we've been pretty darn happy with the Bruce Township service.
I'm not saying we're not happy with them, but that price is going to go up to damn near $500,000 by next time negotiation.
It's already there.
It's already there. I thought we were at 400 and something dollars.
We're at like 750.
So it's going to go over $500,000. So
yes,
that money can be. What's your budget? About two? Oh, 200,000. What? Hell,
It's not cheap to run a fire department.
$2 million.
No, it's not cheap to run
It
a fire
isn't. I'm
department.
not saying it is, but we're going to keep going up as far as with these guys. So we can just start looking and seeing what may happen.
So are you making a motion to move one way or the other? Do you
I'll
want
make
to
a
have any
motion.
more questions for either two of the gentlemen?
Oh, no, I thought we were in public.
No, we're under the agenda item of annexation request from Mr.
All right, I
Zahowski.
make a motion that we approve their zoning request for annexation.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Can you do a roll call on that for me, please?
Can you restate the motion?
Big
I'm
pardon?
sorry.
For annex, I didn't quite
For
clearly.
annexation, yes.
Okay, I didn't clearly hear him. Thank you.
Sorry, it's difficult with
I
these
know.
masks, I know.
All right, roll call vote. Fowler?
Yes.
Edwards?
Yes.
Seidel?
Yes.
Bartholomew?
Yes.
Hart?
Yes.
Poznanski?
Yes.
President Malzahn?
No.
That's everybody, 6-1 vote.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
We'll be working.
Thank you very much.
Yes. All right. Now, next up on our agenda, village to city process. We saw the presentation. I put this on the agenda so we could have further discussion or entertain a motion or a vote to accept or reject their recommendation. which, as you know, was to have this board proceed to Phase 2, Phase 3 again. This has been looked at. The report is extensive and very comprehensive. Aside from the cost factors, I see no con that would not be worthwhile as a deterrent to put this in front of the people. Let the people vote on it. What do they want to do? Okay, we've been talking about this for years and years, putting a ballot initiative together, which is basically the next step after we get the boundary survey and jump through a bunch of legal documents and have some discussions with Bruce Township and Washington Township to negotiate any shared assets or current contracts so that we can establish what exactly that would look like moving forward. So, does anybody else have any other discussion, concerns?
I'll make a motion to abide by the committee's suggestion and move on to Phase 2.
Support.
So we have a motion by Edwards, we have support by Bartholomew.
At which point does the vote take place? How far into this will we get before a vote is taken?
I think that was on page 12.
That was something that a lot of people have asked
Once
me.
the state approves the boundaries.
I'm sorry, I've just got to refer to that page because let me.
Do you want James to speak to it?
James looks like he wants to discuss.
I think I found it. So step 2 of the defined time frame of moving to Phase 2 was give the committee's recommendation to the Village Board of Trustees at a public meeting and receive feedback. We did that tonight. Launch the formal incorporation project and proceed with the remaining steps. Includes presentation to the Village Board in public and follow-up meetings as needed. Number 3 was to create a certified boundary survey. We found the boundary survey that was conducted in 1994. It cost $500 for that survey by Kennedy Engineering. Is Kennedy something? Mr. Vitrano reached back out to them. They said for a minimal amount, they'd be happy to update that document. So we do not need to have that started from scratch. So I'm pretty confident that that cost should be fairly minimal, but in 2020 figures, not 1994 figures, relatively speaking. So the next step would be that boundary survey that we talked about. Number 4 would be develop an inventory of shared assets and liabilities of the village and the 2 townships and develop a settlement plan. We did an accounting of what assets we knew that we shared. There's not a whole lot. James can speak to those specifics if you want to, but we've already developed that list. So would be negotiating those townships. One is the sewer plant, right? Bruce Township has a shared interest in our sewer plant. There wasn't really any shared assets on the Washington Township side. We currently have no 425s or any other operating agreements from Washington Township in the village boundaries. So I'm pretty sure that should be fairly simple. Number 5 was to prepare the petition language and form. So again, you have to gather the petition language. It has to come before this board to vote, to send it down to the county. You submit a draft petition with the survey map to the State Boundary Commission for a preview and input. And you work with the State Boundary Commission as much as they are willing to finalize the petition before circulation. Then we have to gather signatures of the petitioners. So we have the petition language, and then we ask the voters, can we put this on the ballot? We have to gather X amount of signatures, 5% of our population within the village, to move it forward, to actually be printed on a ballot, to be put forward for the voters to come forward. The petition must have certification by the village clerk or township clerk if annexing additional land, the number of residents living within the proposed area of incorporation. So we can gather all of that. Depends on when the census is completed, 2020 census, we may have some new numbers to work with. Otherwise, we're going off the 2010 census numbers. That's where that 3,500 residents came in. So once you have the petition language gathered, you have the signatures gathered, you file that with the State Boundary Commission. Then you prepare to provide reasons for incorporation. We cover all the data contained in the state statute, which is MCL 123.1009, and the Home Rule Cities Act. And you notify the Office of Land Survey and Remonumentation, which notifies the village and affected township clerks that the petition has been filed. That's basically the steps in Phase 2. lots of homework, lots of paperwork, probably more legal than anything, and a little bit of legwork from the boundary survey company, and then getting the language in front of the voters for them to say yes or no. Does that answer your question on phase 2?
Yes, so the public will be in this next phase, for
Yes,
sure.
absolutely.
If I may, real quick.
Yes.
Just there's 3 opportunities, just so the public is aware of it, for the public vote on this, so an actual vote on a ballot by the electorate. The first is the question that will be posed after all those steps: do you want to become incorporated as a city? If the answer to that is yes, then you will elect a charter commission. And so individuals from the community would run for the position of charter commissioner. These individuals may not be sitting elected officials, they're residents of the community, and then those people after the election are sat as the charter commission. The charter commission works together to draft the new charter of the city, which, as detailed in the report quite extensively, that becomes the governing document of the city as opposed to the general village law that you're under now. Then the third election, the final, is that charter is placed before your citizens on the ballot for them to approve. Once that charter is approved, the governing document, that is the trigger of this body, this elected body, not being the elected body anymore, probably until the next election it shall be, but then the next election is when you seat your city council members. So members of this body could run for that, or however that election would occur. So there's actually 3 moments where the citizens will vote on documents related to incorporation. And that charter commission probably didn't get into it much here. It's a little bit, I'm going to go in the weeds now, Marvin, so. That body is really important as an independent body to determine the form of government that this city will take. Will you have an elected strong mayor, or will you have an appointed professional city manager? How will your clerk and your treasurer be appointed? Usually in a city form, they're appointed officials as opposed to elected officials. But your charter commission can go through all of those points and set it up as they think the residents would vote to approve it. So hopefully that answered, and I apologize, President Malzahn, if that was more than expected, but I do think it's important for residents to understand and for the body to understand this is a multi-step process that the state does purposely to make sure that the community is ready to become an incorporated city.
Yeah, that was just a question I had received multiple times, having that we haven't put any information out there. Are we going to get a vote on this? So I wanted everybody to know there will be a vote, not only once, 3 times. Right. Everybody will have a voice, not just us here. Whether or not it passes tonight, you will have a voice.
And the charter commission that he spoke of, that actually writes a new charter, that is none of us. We do not run for that position. So it's fully made up from the people who choose to run for that position.
And we don't pick it either.
Right, it's voted, the people vote. Just like they're voting for us, they're going to vote for a charter commission, whoever wants to put their name on the ballot. So it was just presented before that it would be from us, and it's not. I just wanted you all to know that. It could be ultimately in the final phase, if the new city form of government is adopted, you all could run, or we could all run for city council positions instead of trustee positions, but again, that would be your choice. But it's going to be
how many persons
several years down the road.
Do you know how many persons?
That will depend on how they make it up.
Right.
Okay.
The charter commission will decide that. It's usually 7 or 9.
Okay.
Usually, but again, the beauty of having a charter commission draft from the bottom up is what serves the village residents' needs the best. What does that form of government look like? And it's their recommendation to put before the people to say, yes, we agree, or no, we don't. So, any other discussion?
I have another question that I have gotten is, can we just put this on the ballot coming up in November and save ourselves some of this money to go through these steps to get there?
Nope, the State Boundary Commission wants to do this whole process, because this is not willy-nilly, right?
No, not that we're just gonna, not to go into it, but the question we're being asked tonight, do we want to go forward? Can we put that question on the ballot? Do you guys want to go forward?
the same, I would think that almost the same amount of legwork would need to be done to do that. You still have to draft a ballot initiative. There's still cost associated with giving that to the county to print the ballots, to get the electorates to actually circle in or color in yes or no. There would still need to be some definition of what they're voting for so that they have an idea of what becoming a city truly looks like to them. Aside from just the report, I mean, you can't put this 35-page report on the ballot. So we have to somehow find a way to convey that information to our constituents.
And what is our plan to do that in phase 2 here before it gets to the vote? Or when it,
I would think that
in the process?
That would be part of the ballot initiative and drafting that language, and then the part of gathering the signatures. We're going to need to show them reasons why we are asking them to do this. So, anything else? Did I answer that? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Just one more thing. The only reason that we were considering at one time moving or working with Elmont and Armada as far as the Parks and Rec thing was, it was because Dan O'Leary was the one that wanted to separate from Romeo and Bruce Township. And then when the Washington Township residents voted that down unanimously, is when he kind of changed his tune. But that's the only reason we were considering going north, because he wanted to separate from us and break up our school district and the whole 9 yards. So just want to clarify that.
We also, though, do need to ask to be part of the commission. We are not just going to be right into the Parks and Rec Commission.
Well, we did ask.
We will have to go ask, and they will have to formally say yes. So if you went and asked already for us to have a seat and they told you no, I'm kind of leery that there's a Bruce and a Washington, there's only 2 votes. They can tell us no.
No, because
and then
we
we're
become,
left without Parks and Rec again.
Right. As a city, we become the tax collecting authority. For those millages right now that you see on your pink township tax bills, all those get transferred and rewritten onto a single village tax, or 2 village tax bills, excuse me. So where you get 3 right now, you get 2 townships, summer and winter, you get 1 village. You'll get two city tax bills. I mean, and all those millage rates, those tax levies would be the same. They're pass-throughs.
Correct, but what I'm saying is we aren't just going to be automatically on this Parks and Rec Commission. We turn into a city and now we have to turn to the commission because we've pulled out of being part of the village, and we have to turn and say, can we as a city be part of your commission? And they can look at us and say, no. And then we're left with only $118,000 to do Parks and Rec for the city of the village.
But then it becomes our money. We bring our tax collection to the table. We say, we would like to be part of your commission. This is the full tax capture. We want, and the commission is going to be rewritten anyway. We already know that. Mr. O'Leary wants the commission rewritten in one way or another, and hopefully those negotiations will be ongoing.
But they already get that money and are telling you no to a seat at the table.
And the other thing,
that was not the commission, that was the township board that denied me. It was not the commission, the Parks and Rec Commission. So just to be clear on that.
Correct.
I went to the township boards, and they said they did not want to allow it. But the Parks and Rec Commission, under the direction of Clara, is a different
And this
matter.
is something that Mr. Vitrano said we will have to hash out in this process when we take it to the county, to the state. So this will have to be decided before we can move further.
I don't know that it's like finalized in writing in signatures. I believe those are just negotiated, correct? Because again, if the process doesn't pass, right, if the voters say no, then we can't be entered into new contract agreements that are null and void because the voters haven't approved it. So I think there's an ongoing negotiation and a path forward with some direction, but not necessarily a legal tie that this is your only option.
Yep. What we understand that the state will require is an inventory of these shared associations, these shared assets. So right now that your participation with that commission would be identified and be presented to the state, as would the $1 a year or $1 for 99 years, whatever the lease is for this building from the village to the Parks and Rec Commission. Those would be enumerated to the state. And then as part of that filing, the village, assuming that we've already talked with both townships, would say what the proposed discussion has been to move forward on those agreements. It wouldn't be that all the signatures have to be there, but as part of the filing, they require listing of those shared assets, listing of those shared agreements, and then how one would propose to move forward. An example that the committee talked about, and I think was discussed earlier, the village of Romeo would give its tax collection, the $118,000, to the commission, along with the property to the commission, in exchange for a governance that includes the city. I just made that up quickly, but that's the type of discussion that would be included in that filing, noting all of the assets of each community that are shared. But there wouldn't be a final resolution at that point. It's just that the state would present that and say, yes, we appreciate that. They want to know all of the pitfalls almost, because that's part of what you're trying to define it through this process. Where are things that could have disagreement after incorporation? Identify them all up front and have them identified at least as you go through the process, so that 5 years from now when the lease is up on something, there isn't an outstanding question that the state didn't know when they were making their recommendation on it. Hopefully that's helpful.
Yes, thank you for the clarification.
Any further discussion? Questions? Okay, so we had a motion by Edwards. I'm sorry, I didn't write down who support.
Bartholomew.
Okay, Bartholomew. Could you do a roll call for me, please?
Yep. Edwards?
Yes.
Bartholomew?
Yes.
Fowler?
No.
Hart?
Yes.
Poznansky?
No.
Seidel?
Yes.
President Milzahn?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-2.
Okay. Moving on, we have revisit to the Pampelona Company's alley vacation and municipal lot maintenance agreement. Vito is here tonight. Thank you for your patience. I know this has been a long meeting
quite all
so
right.
far.
I learned a lot.
Hopefully you found it informative, right?
Yeah, I learned a lot.
We have been in discussion since last month. There was some, I don't want to say confusion, but there was a lack of commitment on this board's decision-making to vacate the alley portion in exchange, two different items. Vacating the alley, and then exchange for his zoning compliance so that the parking spaces that he's required to have for his occupancy load met the village
We already meet.
ordinances. Right.
We already meet the parking requirement.
Which he does. So I wanted to clarify, there was some question of how many spaces does he need from the municipal lot, how many does he have on his property? So he has 10. By our zoning ordinance, he has to have 25%, which I believe is 4.
We have 10.
Right, but you have 10, right?
Correct.
For your load occupancy, he has to have 4 on his property, and he has drawn 10 in his site plan review. The other is in anticipation of the actual use. How many people would be visiting those businesses on a daily basis, and where would they park? As I stated at the last meeting, many of our other businesses do not meet those zoning requirements that you have all on-site private parking for your business. In exchange for that, the village has allowed use of municipal lots to meet that mandate. So according to all of our zoning ordinances, he meets the requirements, so I anticipate that his site plan should be approved at Village Council. At Village Planning Commission. They tabled it to send it to us, back to us, for the vacating of the alley, as well as their request for a maintenance agreement. They wanted to see something in writing for the usage of that municipal lot. I've since had several discussions with Mr. Pamplona and agreed that there are no other business that has a maintenance agreement. There are some legalities and liabilities that would come with the signed maintenance agreement. They are not, these parking spaces that would be used on the Bailey Street parking lot would not be signed. They're not used only by him. It's first come, first serve. He doesn't own them. They're not part of his site plan review. And so therefore, I understand his reluctance to sign a long-term sort of license agreement. He did come back and he said he's still willing to help with the beautification of that Bailey Street lot. And I can let you speak to that.
Yeah, we'd like
before we get
to
the
redo the
vacating of the alley.
landscaping and that whole perimeter of the parking lot there.
You did meet with Mr. Clark, your attorney and Mr. Clark?
No, my attorney's up north right now, so my attorney prepared a letter, sent it to Mr. Clark, and then we're just coming back to basically get a formal vote on the vacating of the alley.
Because that's why we tabled it at the planning commission, because your attorney and Mr. Clark were supposed to get together as far as some verbiage.
Well, no, it was tabled in the planning commission because there wasn't a formal vote here. That's why. This body has to vote in order for
Right,
the
this body
vacation.
did not vote because we didn't vote, but we sent it to the planning commission, which was good, because all that laundry got aired out as far as the vacation of the alley. And if I remember correctly, that your attorney and Mr. Clark was supposed to meet in order to work out the verbiage.
No.
Mr. Clark, was that what, I think that's, maybe
All I'll say is I didn't get a letter from anybody.
You didn't? Okay.
Right.
Because that was the end result of that meeting was
It was
the two
discussed at the
attorneys-
planning
the
commission
two
meeting.
attorneys were supposed
Right,
to
that
get
it was
together.
your request that the attorneys meet.
Right.
When
Regarding the vacation of the alley.
When Mr. Pamplona and I, no, not the vacation of the alley, the maintenance agreement. The vacating of the alley is separate, so let's just
And we
make sure that we
We talked
understand
about
that.
the vacating of the alley, too.
At the
Yes.
last meeting here, we spoke about it.
Right.
Yes.
At the planning commission, we did, too, because
Yes,
we weren't 100% sure how much of that alley was vacated, and during those conversations, we found out that the property owner of who they tried to also purchase property gets half of that vacation of the alley. They don't get the full.
right,
So,
I
I
understand
mean,
that.
that discussion came up,
Yep.
which was good, it was aired at that point.
It did.
But I know that was part of the conversation that those two wanted to have, so
No.
obviously they didn't have it.
They didn't want to have, I just want to be clear, they didn't want to have that conversation. It was a request by planning commission for Mr. Pamplona and his attorney to meet with myself and Mr. Clark to execute out a maintenance agreement.
Correct.
And that discussion didn't happen. Private conversations occurred, and Mr. Pamplona came back with an email, which I copied in your packet, of what he was willing to do in lieu of a maintenance agreement for use, for consideration on those municipal parking spaces in conjunction with his site plan. But again, his site plan review meets all of our zoning ordinances. So I anticipate whether we say thank you for putting new landscaping in our parking and striping and resurfacing that parking lot or not, he does or does not have to do that process to get his site plan reviewed. Vacating the alley is another issue, and so I just wanted to address them separately because I don't want them to get confused. I think they were confused last month. So
none of the negotiation included Mr. Clark and yourself talking with them, just you and
I forwarded the communications between us to Mr. Clark, and Mr. Clark and I had several conversations.
Well, that's all I wanted.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, but
All
did we
right.
all
As
meet
long as-
together in one room? No,
as long
we
as you
did
guys
not.
talk. Okay.
Yes, yes. So, I don't think that we need to discuss or vote or make a resolution on the maintenance of the parking lot. I just want you to understand that he is proposing some care, some upkeep, and some beautification to that in exchange for what every other business does here in the village. So, let's move on to vacating of the alley, which is a whole nother, wow, paperwork nightmare. We went back and forth. It's finding some documents between the assessor's office, between the county records, between what documentation he has. And honestly, this would have been a whole lot easier if all of our assessing records were in the village offices, I'm not gonna lie. But they're not, so we had to go outside to try and to gather those. I was confused last month, quite honestly, because when I talked about the alley, when vacating the alley, my map was turned sideways in my head. So you have the Bailey Street lot, and then you have what's considered another alley or a driveway, right? It drives along there and it abuts sort of up to the properties to the east of it. The alley that he's talking about vacating is not even blacktopped or surfaced. It runs parallel to Bailey Street. So he's not asking or receiving any of that driving area that separates the Bailey Street lot from the front of his building. It actually is going to be utilized by people pulling in off of Bailey Street to pull into the parking spaces on his site plan. So I just wanted to make sure.
It's just a right-of-way that we
It's an
own.
easement.
Exactly,
That's
it
all
is.
it is.
The vacating of the alley, again, different parcel. It's to the east of that. So we went all the way back. We had some, I gave to you a copy of the Google Earth shot of the alley. Does everybody have this color picture? And so, right. The alley portion is by this white blob right here. This is the alley that we're talking about, right over in this area, not this. Does everybody know that, what I'm talking about? You do, okay, good. Because I was confused. When you go.
It's all occupied right now. Fences are on it, grass
Yeah.
is on there.
Right, it's not walkable, drivable, you can't ride a bike on it, there's not by any means an alley.
Legally, that's where the boundary is.
Exactly.
I went and walked it.
Yes.
All of the properties just butt right up.
Right.
You cannot, you walk down the alley, one alley on the side of the parking lot, but there is nothing there to walk down.
You would never know there was an alley there.
So, exactly. So, we went back, we pulled from the county an old assessor's field sheet. On the field sheet, I believe you have a copy, it looks like this, right? So, the description, the parcel that's in question says it's 100 and...
We don't have that.
This one?
It says it's 220.
Okay. It says it's 100, the picture showing, I'll pass it around. The picture showing 150 feet. It's broken up into two sections, an 80-foot section, then a 7-foot jog, and then a 70-foot section. That's what the diagram shows.
Okay.
The property description says it's 80 and 80. Makes up the 160 feet that came with Vito's title insurance policy and a succession of title insurance policies, 5 deep, correct?
Yeah, it's from
Okay. So you can pass that
1961.
around.
So,
Yes, because then we dug up this old mortgage from
Yeah.
1961, because we're still trying to figure out where would the paperwork have been to show the vacating of the alley, which is a specific process that Mark referenced that needs to be done. We have no record of that. We don't show it, but we certainly have multiple documents that indicate, again, this mortgage survey dated from May of 1961 that says it's 80 feet with a 7-foot jog by 80 feet.
That'd be the full 100.
That would be the 160 feet.
yeah. And there's nothing prior to that because we couldn't, that mortgage survey is the last thing on record online that we could find. There's nobody else's name on there who transferred the deed over to this Clifford Barton.
Nate.
So if we could have known who Clifford Barton got the deed from, we could have then went back even further, but it's just non-existent.
I mean, right. Digital records go back to maybe, if you're lucky, the 1990s. We're lucky
Yeah.
that we found this one from the 60s.
So
Yeah,
we're
that was on the
vacating 10
US
feet
land.
to their development?
Well, ultimately, I believe the process would be to officially vacate both, because we cannot prove, and we can continue to research
222
it.
also.
Right. If we're going to complete the process, Mark is in agreement that we should do both.
But according to his conversation at the planning commission, not putting any words in your mouth, he said that if we vacate the one half, then the other half would then go to the other property owner unless he vacates that himself.
That is correct.
That would be something that the property owner has to do. So
Right, so
we
it
can-
would go on
we can do the
parcel
10
ID number 7.
We can do the 10-foot, give him what he wants, but then it's up to him to talk to the owner as far as that other 10-foot, correct?
No.
We don't want the other 10 feet of
You
the
don't
other.
want?
No, we don't want
just give you
that.
10 foot and get going.
Yeah, we only want the
All right.
10
I make a
feet,
motion
and that
to
other
take
10
the
feet is
10
for
feet.
that guy to the east of us.
Let's get out of here.
Right. I'll support.
See ya.
Thank you. But the question is, do we want to do 222 vacate and 220? Do we want to do both properties?
And let me just say before this gets too far afield, no pun intended. If you're going to vacate the alley, vacate the whole alley. Don't vacate 10 feet. You really can't do that. You're going to vacate the alley if you choose, and there's a process for that. You vacate the alley, and the legal description, the alley basically will be split in half. 10 feet will fall on the property that abuts it to the west, and 10 feet will fall and be attached to the parcel or the property that lies on the east.
And that'll be the whole length of the alley from Newberry.
Well, that's your choice. That's what you have to decide. And there are title records that go back before 1961. They may not have been able to be found digitally or online, but somebody can do an examination and find out when, if it in fact happened, that the alley was vacated to the north, or on that northern piece of property. Because one of the things that's curious to me, and you never want to hear a lawyer say things are curious, but one of the things that's curious to me is what the legal description, you're concerned, and rightfully so, and particularly on the Planning Commission, you're concerned about the specific project, how it's to be developed, the sufficient number of parking spaces and so forth. But one way to determine perhaps the vacation of the parcel to the north, if you will, or the northern parcel of the two, is what the legal description is of the properties on the east side of that alley. Because if they include the 10 feet, then the likelihood is at some point there was a formal vacation.
To that answer, no. We checked with the assessor's office today. Actually, Tori did the research, so thank you, Tori. She's our go-to gal. As is Sam. I should introduce Sam back there. He's another intern that's, they've both been investigating these things, and it's, to your use word, it's fascinating, right?
It is.
Right. There is nothing attached to parcel 7 that says that their property line is anything other than the 150 that this plat shows.
So then
We did a title search at Greco. We did a title search, and it didn't come up with anything. The only thing that they came up with was what Christine came up with and what I came up with in regards to the mortgage. And then you can't just go walk into the county, to the U.S. land because of COVID.
Right.
And I called over there, and they specifically told me, look, everything that we have back to the 1800s is online. And that's what we got.
This border on lot 5, is that 10 feet?
I don't dispute what you were told, but mortgages don't just materialize in thin air. Somebody bought the property before 1961 to be able to grant a mortgage and borrow money. And so if the property on the east side doesn't contain the 10 feet, I question whether there was a proper vacation of the alley at all. And so, if you're going to vacate the alley, I would recommend that you vacate the alley in its entirety, or for the length of both parcels, that don't leave that dangling for somebody 20 years from now, 50 years from now, to have the same discussion. And then, if you're going to vacate the alley, there's a process for that. If you're going to do that, you make a resolution to that effect tonight, and then you have to give notice of a meeting 4 weeks, or not less than 4 weeks. It doesn't have to be exactly 4 weeks, but not less than 4 weeks, for people to come and object to it, and then you'll vote formally to vacate the alley.
All right, I'll change my resolution, or my motion here, is that we motion to vacate the alley in its entirety.
So from the easement of 1N to E, right, are you looking at this map? This Macomb County GIS survey. So from the easement of Bailey Street parking lot all the way to Newberry. So you're doing lot 5, 6, 7, and 8.
Yeah. I think it goes to Newberry as well.
Newberry too?
No,
that's what I'm asking.
Well, you don't have to go beyond Newberry, but I'm recommending that you not carve up the alley, so to speak, that you not vacate it in these small increments. If it's appropriate to vacate it, and that's your decision, if it's appropriate to vacate it, it should be such that you don't end up with the situation you have now, where between the two lots, the one to the north, it appears the alley was vacated, although I'm skeptical, and it appears the parcel to the south that was not vacated. So you can clean that up now if you choose, and that would be my recommendation. If you're going to vacate anything, then do it in a reasonable description, or a reasonable beginning point and end point. I'm not suggesting you need to go beyond Newberry, but...
If I make a suggestion, maybe from St. Clair, because that's where the parking lot and the house is, there's nothing going to be there for sure, too, so maybe from St. Clair to Newberry.
Well, St. Clair's right up, we have our parking lot.
Because then you're going to vacate the middle of the actual alley.
I think that still might be there. It looks like it on the drawing that it's there.
I'll second your motion, Mr. Fowler.
All right, well, let me clean it up.
Yeah. Can you restate that, please?
All right.
Right?
Now, one last question to Mr. Clark. So I get this motion out here, then the property owners on the east side and the west side will then be notified indicating that we're vacating the alley, and for them to either show up if they want their half or not, basically?
No, not exactly. If you pass a resolution tonight to vacate the alley of whatever dimension, it should be the entire width, and as I know I'm repeating myself, but it should be an identifiable length in the north-south direction. So you pick the portion of the alley to be vacated, then you give notice of that, not just to the property owners, you give notice generally, and there's a hearing. You're required by law to conduct a hearing so people can come and object. Okay. If nobody objects, you could still decide to not go through with it, but in any event, you can't vacate it without the formal resolution or ordinance. You can do it by ordinance. You can't do that until after the public hearing. So you can express your intent to do that, let everybody know. People can come and say this is the greatest thing since the invention of 7-Up, or they can say, no, this is a really bad idea, and encourage you not to do it. But you have to give people the opportunity, because you're talking about public property. And in a way, it's a gift of public property. I'm not saying that in a pejorative sense, but you're giving away public property. So people, by law, have need to be given the opportunity to come and speak about it.
Okay, off that, what you just said here. All right, we put the resolution out there to vacate the alley from St. Clair to Newberry. Just figure of speech here. Now, the property owners on the east side and the west side, like you said, then they're gifted 10 feet?
Well, yeah, because when you vacate the alley, 10 feet of it's going to go to the property owners on the west of the alley, and 10 feet's going to go to the property owners on the east side of the alley, and nobody's going to pay any money for that.
Okay, all right.
Well, I'd like to say the development that I'm going to put in here, we will actually be paying for this vacation of this alley in tax dollars. I mean, this building's going to be here for however many years.
I'm not making a value judgment. I'm saying that.
Well, I'm just saying it's not actually a gift. I mean, it is going to go onto the tax roll for the village.
He wasn't talking about your part. He was talking about the property.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Well, you are giving away public property.
Correct. I understand.
I'm not saying that's a bad idea. I just want everybody to appreciate what they're doing.
So basically, the people that own that property have been maintaining it for 50 years anyhow.
Yeah.
So just move on to the next agenda item, make the motions go.
Yeah.
Right.
We cleared up. All right, make the motion that we
start turning the pumpkins.
I don't think that we should vacate the alley, though, to St. Clair.
No.
Because that splits the municipal lot, the existing parking lot.
You give half to, no.
From the alley to the
Right?
Newberry.
You would only do it, do it
just to
from...
the alley.
You know, lot is on there?
That's fine,
Yes,
just to the alley.
the Bailey Street parking lot is.
Is on it.
Yes.
So go back to your first one.
So from the alley to Newberry.
From the east-west alley, right?
Yes. Thank you, Mark.
Okay. So we had a motion by Fowler to vacate the alley from the 1 and 2E easement
Newberry.
to Newberry.
Yes.
Oh, do we have
Megan
support?
supported that.
Megan? Oh, we have support by Poznansky. Can you do a roll call, please?
You ready? Yeah. Bartholomew?
Yes.
Poznansky? You should recuse yourself.
Yes.
Seidel?
I'll recluse myself.
Good man.
Okay.
Right word.
Yes.
Good man.
One moment, let me make note. Edwards?
Yes.
Fowler?
Yes.
Hart?
Yes.
President Malzahn?
Yes.
Just gonna go.
Motion carries 6-0 with one recused.
All right.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So I'm sure there's some more documents that we'll work out.
Yeah, with planning commission, we can go through the maintenance
Yes.
agreement and figure that out.
Okay, perfect.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a good night.
You too.
Okay, let's move into new business. You have in your packet, I think I just confused this here, the Ted B. grant resolution. So I worked with Hubble Roth and Clark, our engineering firm. There's grant money, 50% matching grant that we could apply for. So I applied for the grant. We looked at the identified roads that needed the most work according to our PACER study. And I also looked at the least expensive project because although there are some areas that are in greater need, they were much more costly. And this is a 50% match, so I wanted to be able to be cautious with what money we do have in reserve. So the grant should be approved. It will pave Croswell Street from Van Dyke up to Sisson Street. It will grind, mill, and resurface that entire road. It will cost the village, where do I have that in front of me? Oh, that's not the right one.
131,990?
Yes, yep, 131,000. I put on it as a side note in the lower right-hand corner some quick notes of where we could pull those funds from. If we were going to fund this project, out of the major street, we have 177,000. Out of local streets, we have 211,000, and we have our 505,000 in public improvement.
I'll make the motion that we move forward with the maintenance program for repaving of those streets listed here on the sheet.
Okay. Support. So we have a motion by Bartholomew, we have support by Poznanski. Roll call, please.
Bartholomew?
Yes.
Poznanski?
Yes.
Fowler?
No.
Edwards?
Yes.
Hart?
Yes.
Seidel?
Yes.
President Malzahn?
Yes.
Motion carries 6-1.
Thank you. We'll be good to get one road fixed. Yay! We'll get one road
It's a
fixed.
start.
It's a start, exactly. We're doing something. That's the main part. Okay, you have a special event permit. We haven't seen one of these in forever, right? Homecoming parade request before you. The date proposed is Wednesday, October 7th, assuming that school starts. This email came to me back in June, so I'm anticipating that they're going to be actually having some in-person activities at the school. So homecoming parade, just like years past, we need to send the resolution over to the county. Chief Dan will take care of that work. It will.
Make a motion? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Enough explanation. Motion by,
You were the yes, right? Second?
I think Randy did. Okay, so we have a motion by Fowler to approve. We have support by Seidel. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, then moving on, we have new business, Younger's Irish Tavern Street Shindig permit request. This came about as a result of Peach Fest being closed and a local business owner just trying to figure out how to get a crowd here or give his patrons something to do for that weekend. He did meet with the Office Pub. Let me finish real fast. No, I know, I'm tick, 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 right? He met with the surrounding business owners. They're in favor. At this time, they didn't think that they had the staffing or the wherewithal to participate, but they're not in any objection that I have heard. Just real quick, as a follow-up, Glenn is going to organize this by selling tickets. There'll be $5 for admittance fee that will have the disclaimer for any COVID concerns that anybody may have. It'll be held in the municipal lot, so the municipal lot will be closed off. The access point from the dumpster corral up to the back of the alley that's there, the walking alley behind Younger's, behind his patio area. He's going to rope off on an angle from the dumpster corral to a light pole so that there's not a hindrance getting into the Office Pub. Again, just trying to make it as easy for that. The proceeds from that $5 admission fee, he's supporting 3 local charities, Romeo Lions Club, St. Baldrick's, and the Romeo Police Department will all see those funds. So he's not capturing any of that money, but just as a way to keep the count under control of how many were coming. Okay, go.
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
Support.
Support. Thank you. Okay, Fowler, Hart, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we're getting there, Muni Code. There was a lot of discussion, inquiries about our online, the link that's provided on our website to Muni Code. So let me just clarify this. The website that's up there, the link that's up there is maintained through a $550 hosting. That just allows it to be there. It doesn't include anything new being added to it. That's a separate service. It all has to be coded. Catherine and staff have sent down probably about 14 or 15 ordinances, and they're just sort of sitting there until we approve the expenditure for them to actually code it and upload it to the website. So it's creating this lag of we've adopted and amended ordinances, but that's not what people are seeing online. So
And that's
it's a
$550?
necessary expenditure. No, it's $550 just to maintain it. Did I not put the other one in here?
Total 550?
36. I'm just seeing that. It was $3,600 because it was over our pay grade to approve it. Yes.
Okay, and that's taking care of like a number of years worth of stuff?
It hasn't been updated since 2014.
February of 2014, that's correct.
What is the total?
So the 36 is including this 550.
No, what's the total?
No, the 36 is a different
top of the
expenditure. Our 550 is our yearly
So
fee.
we have 36 and paying the
That is correct. We've been paying this yearly fee.
So we're approving the 550?
And now 3,600.
36?
But I
Yeah,
thought we already
550.
approved the 36 at some point, right? Didn't we?
Not as long as I've been presenting it, and I'm looking for that. I could have swore it was in this packet, but I'm not seeing mine.
I'm not seeing it.
There were two.
There's no other
It's so outdated that the old, it still has Mike Krieger on it, right?
And Margaret
Feldis as the Board of Trustees. So it's probably time that we take a peek and update it. So the $550 is the annual fee. We just automatically approve that because it's within our expenditure to do that. In conjunction, it would be another $3,600
I'll make a motion
So the
that we,
3,600 just brings us up to date,
Yes,
but then for future updates, we'll
as we
have a new
change
fee.
ordinances.
yes.
But up to
Yes.
date doesn't just mean change the trustee names. It means publish all the ordinances that are held in this queue.
Yeah, because I couldn't find our
And any future ordinances.
peddler
We'll have to
ordinance.
pay.
Right, it is not up there.
The
Right, so-
550 does the future ordinances, right?
No. that
No,
just-
the 550 keeps it on our website.
The one we're about to talk about will not be paid for. We'll have to approve that again, another
Well, it will be
expense.
under,
Right, if we approve this
It won't be
marijuana ordinance, it would be an additional.
And we'll have
but
to,
it won't be under this, it'll be under the budget. It'll be their normal, it'll be their normal, it's just that it's been 6 years. 3,600 is 6 years worth of work.
All right, all right.
So I'll make a motion that we approve the $3,600 to bring our current ordinances up to date with the Muni Code website.
support.
Okay. So we have a motion by Hart, we have support by Poznanski. Roll call, please. Hart?
Yes.
Poznanski?
Yes.
Bartholomew?
Yes.
Seidel?
Yes.
Fowler?
Yeah.
Edwards?
Yes.
And President Milzon?
Yes.
Motion carries. Can I add on that, though? They do have software available. I don't have a quote that it can be updated in-house. So once we are up to speed, that can be further discussed.
Maybe bring that for this next ordinance.
Yes, that could be further discussed, yes.
All right, moving on. The last agenda item, under new business, our marijuana proposed ordinance. So, you gave me some direction to draft an ordinance. We've been through several different versions. It's been before this board. And then I met with Tom Dion, Mayor of Utica, who just recently adopted theirs, and I asked him if he would share his resources, their process, his learned lessons so that we could help avoid some of the same pitfalls that he undertook. And he was more than gracious to share that. I shared them with Mr. Clark, and we agreed just before the Planning Commission meeting that it would be better suited to have one combined ordinance that regulated both recreational and medical, even though those two are ruled by two different state governing bodies. There's two oversight committees. So this makes reference to both the MRTA and the MFLMA safety guidelines that you have in there. But it took into account, hopefully you took time to read through this, the process, the application process, what the scoring process would look like, what that would do. So having it all here documented would eliminate all those different pieces, and then anybody reviewing it would know exactly what the requirements were, what the fees associated with, and what our process would be. So we revamped it. I revamped it. I sent it on to Mr. Clark. He reviewed it. I sent it on to Village Planner Steve Casson just to make sure that the zoning amendments, because that's the other piece that still needs to be adopted. For this ordinance to be adopted, we could approve it at the board level, but this document states that any licenses will be granted by special land use, which is a planning commission function. So another built-in layer of somebody looking at who's getting these licenses, sending it to the planning commission. It also would require our zoning ordinance to allow for the usage. So that ordinance has to be amended as well. But this body is only really concerned with this ordinance that you have in your packet as a proposal. So that's it in an overview discussion.
I had a couple thoughts on it.
Yes.
One area, it had said that we're going to allow up to 2 locations, but then we're going to mandate that they be 1,000 feet apart from each other. I could understand if we were having a retail or, I'm sorry, I got this, or something. If it's going to be in the industrial district, would it be, if there were 2 buildings next to each other, I mean, wouldn't that even possibly be beneficial? I mean, to mandate that it's 1,000 feet apart for this type of facility, is there a purpose to that?
Well, my thought is that if there's any violations, right, if there's any concerns, it's easier to pinpoint specifically where that would be coming from if there is a buffer.
Okay.
That was my thought.
So if like there's odor, noxious odor that's coming, you could say maybe a little more definitively which location is doing that.
That was my
makes
thought,
some
right.
sense.
Mhm.
Yeah, I thought it was a little odd that we asked for 1,000 feet between the facilities, but only 500 from schools.
Yeah, there's not
I
going
would
to be a
think we.
school there.
Can
Well,
you explain?
It's
Right.
restricted
It's a
to
state.
industrial park, so.
So there won't be a school over there because it's mandated to be east of M53 and north of 32 Mile Road. Doesn't say that somebody couldn't buy a piece of property and put a school there, but it is the industrial district, so it's highly unlikely that a school would ever be there. So
That was the east of M53 bypass, correct?
So we could
I
put a
added the
bigger
word
number.
bypass.
All
Yes,
right,
I
there we
did.
go.
Yes.
If you put a bigger number, it wouldn't matter, I guess.
The other question, and I wasn't clear since we've talked about this a while ago, but with the individual, the company that was looking to propose this initially, they were offering, certain compensation to the village, percentages or those type of things to generate revenue. And it seemed like that might be something that's negotiable. I wasn't, in reading through this, I don't know how that kind of process would go. Like a candidate might offer a bigger, and I don't even know what the legalities of that, but I do remember.
But it would be in the ordinance, right?
Well, the process for points and how it's awarded, how a contract is awarded, and forgive me if it's in there, but I didn't see where there was anything for what a particular proposal, they might have a better proposal.
It's not, and I caution against, as benign as it might be, I caution against the perception that somebody might be able to buy a license. The scoring system, and Mrs. Malzahn and I talked about this quite a bit, and I also talked to the Utica City Attorney about this, is that you want the fight, if there's going to be a fight, it's going to be over who gets it. And so the scoring system is designed to be as objective as it can be. And so you don't, my recommendation is you don't want to interject or include something that might skew or even appear to skew the objectivity of the selection process. And so I would caution against anything that might shade in that direction.
So, again, some of the things, and I didn't pull out the things before, but there were, like when you started putting the numbers to it and the math, it looked pretty lucrative to the village, in that kind of proposal. With the scoring system, could you get somebody that wasn't kicking anything back to the municipality.
Well, I wouldn't
That's
use
still
that
good.
term kicking back.
Yeah.
That has some unsavory connotations.
The
So-
reason we're doing this, though, is it can be a good revenue source for the village.
Right, but it has to be an objective and a lawful revenue source.
Right.
And so the law permits the charging of a fee of up to $5,000, which is provided in the ordinance. And then if there are separate inspection fees, whatever your inspectors would have to do, they'd be entitled to that money, or the village would. But you're not, again, allowed really to try or position yourselves to sell because you have a very limited number of licenses. I think you have a total of 4, 2 in 2 different categories. And so you can't position yourself to essentially award or grant a license to the highest bidder.
But there were some percentages, I don't know if you can, maybe you can speak, yeah, go ahead.
So, I'm Jamie Lucero. My group is the group that presented back in March, and what we had offered was for you guys to look into it. The state of Michigan allows for municipalities to tax individuals, either an individual citizen, an industry, a business. So that's what we were saying, is when you guys form this, that was where that extra revenue was coming. We weren't saying we were going to give you guys 3%.
I get that.
To Mr. Clark's concerns. We weren't trying to sweeten the pot to say, deal with us because we're the only ones offering you that. We were saying, tax our industry, bring the industry in, because that in and of itself has a way to bring more revenue into this town and help this town survive and thrive. And if it turns into a city, it's another revenue source. So that's what we were saying, and that's what those numbers were based off of. We weren't saying, we're offering you guys 3% just so we can do business with you guys.
Right.
That's not what we were trying to do.
So should something in a tax be in this?
Are you asking me?
Yes.
I would,
Because $5,000 isn't what we were looking at being able to tax this, and it was
well, whatever the law permits you to tax, this ordinance isn't going to prevent you from doing that. But what you can tax would only be that which the law would permit.
Right, so the ordinance doesn't have to have anything with that in there.
I do not believe it does, because the ability to tax is granted solely by the state legislature. You otherwise have no ability to do that. And so whatever the law permits, if you choose to do that, you can do it. If you're not mandated to tax it. And so
So whoever is awarded this by the point system, our tax is a separate situation from this, so that's what you're saying.
I am saying that.
Yeah, okay. So that answers my questions.
So I'd like to make a motion that we accept this ordinance to provide for the licensing and regulating of marijuana businesses here in the village of Romeo, as this proposal outlines.
Could I just mention one more thing before you discuss that? Just procedurally, I just ask you to consider this. You certainly have the legal authority to adopt the ordinance. If you do, it goes into effect 20 days from the way it's written, 20 days from, is it publication or, yes, 20 days from publication. You've not yet, because you haven't had a public hearing, nor has the Planning Commission, on the amendment to your zoning ordinance. I just want to let you know, if you adopt the ordinance and it goes into effect, you don't have any place to put it, these businesses. So you may want to, and again, your discretion, I'm not trying to influence what you do or your vote, but I am trying to avoid you saying next month, gee, Mark, how'd you let that happen? Is that until you amend your zoning ordinance, if you adopt this ordinance and it goes into effect, you don't have any place to put the businesses. So I just mentioned that to you.
But we could vote to approve the ordinance pending publication and approval of the zoning amendments by the Planning Commission.
You can. That's not my preferred recommendation or my preferred procedure. But yes, I mean, quite honestly, it doesn't go into effect until 20 days from publication.Maybe it doesn't get published right away. But
Okay.
you just have to make sure you follow
Planning
the
Commission
law.
is holding their public hearing on August 6th,
Yes,
correct?
for the
It's already
rezoning.
been
For the
published.
zoning amendments.
For the zoning amendments, yes.
That's not rezoning.
And one other point of clarification, if I may, it was brought to my attention that we had the wrong number of plants in the distinguished between the growers Class A, Class B, and Class C. I believe Class C was 2,000?
On recreational, it's 2,000.
Yes.
On medical, it's 1,500 for Class C.
So you'd have to define those two.
Yes, I will, I'll need to fix that.
Medical, 2,000.
Okay, so that, did you want to restate your motion?
Yeah, but I forgot everything that you just said about the, that was a lot of words.
I'm sorry.
So-
So you're going to, you offered a motion to recommend adopting this ordinance
Correct.
once properly publicate.
Yes.
Public, right.
Well,
Printed.
if
Published.
you adopt it, you'll adopt it tonight. It won't be effective until it's
Right,
published.
until it's published, yes, okay.
And
You got
publishing.
20 days to publish it, right?
No, it's not effective for 20 days after it's published.
But then let's throw in
But
another
you can take
wrinkle.
applications, though.
No. Well,
Let's
we're
throw in
taking-
another
we're not
wrinkle.
taking
You're
applications.
supposed to, under the General Law Village Act,
just
publish
slow down.
ordinances within 15 days of their adoption. So
Okay.
it might not go into effect until 20 days after it's published, but the General Law Village Act requires you to publish ordinances within 15 days of their adoption. And so, again, my concern is, and I'm not saying it's not a manageable thing, but it's possible you would adopt the ordinance, Mrs. Trapp publishes it within the 15 days. It goes into effect 20 days later, which is before you adopt, if you do, and you could have I'll say unfortunate result of adopting the ordinance, the marijuana ordinance, and not adopting the zoning ordinance. It's highly unlikely you would do that, but politics being what they are, votes are cast at every meeting. So I just don't want anybody to be surprised by the procedure.
Okay.
I have a question about the points, about the point system of awarding things. Can we legally put a minimum? So if there's 100 points possible, can we say we want 75 points or above will be the ones considered? Are you allowed to say something like that?
Well, I think you are. I think you are allowed to set a threshold. That was one of my concerns. What if everybody that submits has, their total is 40 points?
Yeah, and then
then you're perhaps looking at
subpar.
an entity that's not really able to manage the permit you might otherwise
Because
grant.
that goes into my next thought is that only the first batch will all get assigned points. And then after should all of the licensings be taken up or something be vacated, then the village clerk shall not be required to score applicants. Instead, the clerk shall evaluate applications in the order they're submitted and shall award licenses for all of the facilities. So at that point, again, we could just, in the order they come in, you come in with the 40 points. Do we have to let that one come in, or can we say with a minimum of meeting a required amount of height of points? We want grades A and B, we don't want...
It was my understanding from Utica that we couldn't pick and choose who we wanted based on the scores, that the clerk and the treasurer would score them independently as the system that I've set up, and they would give us those results. We would award licenses to the highest number of points, or we could award none to nobody. So we're not obligated just because you get 2 applicants and they score 20 to give out any licenses.
Okay.
We can't say, well, I want the 20 over the 60 because we have some other reason. We can't pick and choose that way, but we can say they've evaluated them, these are the 2 highest point getters. We can award the licenses based on that, or we can say, nope, we're not going to award
Or
any.
you could still give them to the 20-pointer.
No, this says the highest point totals.
Okay.
But if the highest point is 20, then yes.
Then yes.
Yes.
So why do we have a point system anyways? It doesn't even make any sense.
Because we're trying to establish a fair and equitable process based on the specific criteria in here to limit any reference to a favoritism or a bias.
But are the metrics such that if it's a different treasurer and a different clerk, the numbers would be the same, or would they be different numbers? What's the subjectivity of the analysis? What are they doing? Where are their points coming from? Would Bob come up with a 40 point, and I'd come up with an 80 point?
Right. Well, there's specific criteria that's here. So if you read question number 2, whether the proposed marijuana grow facility, marijuana transport facility, marijuana processing facility, compliance facility will be consistent with land use for the surrounding area and not have a detrimental effect on traffic patterns. I mean, there's specific criteria.
So the score would be the same no matter who's doing the scoring?
It should be.
Right, relatively. It
I mean, that's the
either
intent.
meets it or it doesn't, right?
And it
Yes.
could be debated, right? If Jamie
Right.
didn't score as high as he wanted, he could say, wait a minute, I do meet that criteria. Does he have a chance to do that, or Jamie?
Well, that's what we try and limit, because that's where litigation comes into play.
Okay,
right?
I want to make sure that
Yes.
I can't be in an angry mood and vote a little bit lower than Bob would. Right, I want to make sure that it...
Address the board, I would like to have my name removed from the application process of evaluating.
Okay.
That will allow someone.
But the ordinance
the
wouldn't,
opportunity.
you just would.
It does say that, because
I know.
I specifically asked her to allow for 2 other elected officials within the village that aren't voting members on awarding the licenses to actually do that work. And I knew that when I spoke with Treasurer Maddox, that she was in opposition to the ordinance, and I thought actually that put us in a better position, because she would truly be able to evaluate them maybe more critically, knowing that she wasn't in favor of the ordinance to begin with.
Could she have a deputy treasurer do it if she didn't want to?
Would the planning commission?
We don't have a deputy treasurer.
Would the planning commission?
So it's just two elected non-voting members. would
Well,
do the analysis.
Utica utilized their clerk. They used 1. I thought, again, safeguards, let's do 2. We have 2 other elected officials, let's, task them with that.
He's the chair of the planning commission. Chair, vice chair.
But I wanted somebody who the residents, who actually reported to the residents, where I appoint, the planning commission members. Again, I'm just trying to remove myself from the process as much as possible with any undue influence as to who is getting this. So if the treasurer doesn't want to do the work, then we can just rely on the work of the clerk and legal counsel.
Well, and I would also suggest you keep in mind, you're talking about the office, not the person. Not that the person isn't important, the person is very important, but it's the office regardless of who populates the office.
That's what I was going to say, you might want to put and/or or something like that. In other words, keep that office of treasurer in.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe
So the treasurer's
she
office.
doesn't want to do it.
And that can be somebody within the.
Catherine do it.
Okay.
Appointed to do it.
And/or or something like that in there.
Okay.
Because like Bart's saying, it's the office that you want.
Okay. Okay, just cross that out. So we'll put this and/or. Okay.
Regardless of your position, you're really just doing the analysis of whether they meet the criteria. You're not, it's not your opinion, it's not your person, it's just.
But the way this is worded, it's
check,
not a straight amount of points. It says the maximum number of scoring points in this category shall be X. So they could give them 2, they could give them 5. It's not like if you get this, check it off, you get 10 points. You get 10 points. They will have to make a decision oh, you kind of did it, you only get 2. Well, this person did a little more, they get 3.
That's a little dicey. Because you either meet it or you don't.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying if we could have thinking of a minimum, I don't know. I just,
10 checks equals 100 points, and 7 checks is 70 points, not 62 and a half points.
because I could see the predicament then you're in, and whoever has to choose that.
Because does a brick building get you 10 points and a block building gets you 9? I mean, that's where it could get really.
Yeah, the evaluation process is a bit of a tricky one.
I mean, I like it over just pulling random names out of the hat, then you could be getting who knows what. I like having some sort of something, I just don't know how else to tweak it.
In your discussion points with Utica, you didn't talk to Warren, correct?
I did not.
Warren's attorney?
I did not. I did, after you and I spoke, I did get a call from the Utica City Attorney, and so far they've been, I'll say, pleased with the setup that's from which this was drawn. And I think there was one, she mentioned to me there was one appeal that I think is pending, but she thought for the most part it was all working well. And but it's new. They adopted this in February, Utica did, and we're in July, the village is in July, so there hasn't been a lot of give and take with respect to it.
So, if it's working for those cities, I think it would work for us.
I would think so.
Because I'm going on 16 hours of wearing a mask, I'm starting to lose oxygen.
You do have attached in your packet the proposed zoning amendments that the Planning Commission, which is basically just the definitions that are included within ours, and then the specificity of where it's going to be. Again, east of the M53 bypass, north of 32 Mile Road. So we had a motion on the table, and I'm sorry, do you want to restate your motion, rescind your motion?
My motion stands.
Okay, which was to?
To adopt this ordinance.
Okay.
Although you made a little change there, with that change you made.
To the number of plants.
Yeah.
Number of plants?
2,000 plants for
And the
medical.
and/or, okay. So we had a motion by Bartholomew, we have support by Edwards. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
1.
Nay, 2.
2? Okay. 5-2. So then we will send that final version, I'll update that, send that to Planning Commission, hold the public hearing on the zoning amendments, and then based on their vote, get things published or not published.
Where
All
will you
right.
publish it?
It depends on the cost, and it depends on the date of publication, the timing of it. So I believe Catherine has been weighing both the Record and/or the Macomb Daily, again, depending on the schedule.
So either of those two?
Correct. Yeah.
Drag it out 15 days.
And you can publish a synopsis, you don't have to publish the entire ordinance, which should effectuate a cost saving.
All right, was there anybody else from the public that wanted to make a comment to the board?
I was just trying to touch base on when you guys were talking about the schools there. I mean, we have listed in here, but secondary and vocational, that's not like elementary school or middle school. So there's a lot of trade schools and stuff that would fall into that. You might want to look into, because the footage might contradict, because there might be some in that district.
Okay.
Like the trucking training?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, trade schools and stuff like that.
So it's a public school or something would be the wording.
But there aren't any out there currently, right?
No, not that I'm
Okay.
aware
But
of.
the wording.
I would check.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll consider that under the site plan review, then when we go for the special land use approval, right? Okay. All right, any other public comments? Yes, Mr. Blanchard, right?
Is this, am I allowed to comment on anything that we've spoken tonight?
Public comments.
Anything?
Has the money already started being spent to become a city? Have you already taken money out of our account and started spending the money just to find out if we were gonna be getting there, or is there no money spent yet?
We had a not to exceed allocation of $10,000 when this process started, and that was to cover our consultant fees and the legal fees that we've encountered so far in the investigation. So yes, we have spent some of those funds.
So I guess the other half of that question is, were we as citizens given a vote on that?
No, that was
No, so it was on this board's, your trustees' decisions to go ahead and spend our tax dollars without asking us if that was okay.
Correct. It did not require a ballot initiative. Yep, it was a goals and objectives item that we talked about at our budgeting workshops, and when we established the budget, we set aside that monies for this project at that time.
And there's only one request. When you asked for public comment, earlier you did, and nobody got a chance to even put their arm up, so please be a little respectful. Some of us have arthritis, we may be young and spry, it takes a second to pop. So just please be, respectful of the elders and us that just can't, real quick, okay?
Certainly.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Any other comments? All right, then at this time, we're going to enter into closed session. We have to go into closed session pursuant to Michigan MCL 15.268 for strategy and negotiating sessions connected with the negotiation of collective bargaining agreements. So I bid you all a good night.
Do we need to make a motion to go out of?
Wait, that was a motion?
Oh, okay.
Right. Right now, we're going to close the regular meeting. Yep.
We had that question though.
It's a roll call vote, if you guys can stay put.
Yes.
Zach?
Just 1 second, yes.
Malzahn?
Yes.
Ken, but you have to vote to go
Bartholomew?
to closed session.
Edwards?
Okay, all right.
Fowler?
Yes, what?
Hart?
Yes.
Poznanski?
Yes.
Seidel?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Now you guys can use the
Thank
bathroom.
you. We're back into regular public session, and I'm going to make a motion to approve the first responder pay in the amount of $9,633.89, excuse me.
Support?
Roll call, please.
President Malzahn?
Yes.
Bartholomew?
Yes?
Seidel?
Yes.
Poznanski?
Yes.
Hart?
Yes.
Fowler?
Yes.
Edwards?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Motion to adjourn?
Support. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? 9:59.
Do you need these?